Halloween night, 1957. Los Angeles sits warm and windless, porch bulbs making small yellow islands up and down the block. A doorbell rings for what should be the last time. On the step, one figure, coat over a cheap 5-and-dime mask, brown paper sack, folded twice at the top. The voice is polite, almost shy. Trick or treat. Inside, a man balances the candy bowl in the habit of being kind at his own door. The doormat says welcome in worn letters. The porch light hums. Somewhere down the curb, a car waits with its engine off and the heater ticking as it cools. Neighbors settle dishes, radios murmur, and the calendar is a shield. This is the safe night. The figure shifts the bag to the left hand. The right never leaves the pocket. A second press of the bell. The latch lifts. For 3 seconds, the doorway is 2 rooms at once, bright kitchen behind, a costume in front, and then the holiday shape of the night gives way to the plan hidden inside it. Hey, glad you're here. I keep the lamp low and tell history carefully. Real places, real dates, steady detail. Before we start, do our 3 soft checks with me. Slow breath in, loosen your jaw, thumb on the table, click the quiet key. Drop your city and local time in the comments and add what you're listening on, so our little night map can circle the world. New, calm history horror arrives most nights. If this keeps you company, wait until the video ends to subscribe, then tap the bell so the next file finds you. After, tell me what details stayed with you. On Halloween 1957 in Los Angeles, a courteous knock and a dime store mask turn a front door ritual into a targeted act. The trail that follows, receipts, a borrowed coat, and a car waiting under a dark street tree tests how well a disguise can pass in plain sight. He walked the block like he had always lived there, and no one could say he didn't. It was one of those Los Angeles Octobers that still felt like July, the heat hanging even after the street lamps came on. The porches along the side street off Pico wore amber bulbs, easy, gentle light that made kids look like movie extras. He wasn't a kid, but he wore what kids wore, a folded paper grocery sack with a hand-cut oval for a handle, a loose black cape that looked stitched in the car on the way, and a rubber devil mask with a seam down the chin. From the sidewalk, he read as tall for 12, maybe short for 16. In the soft light, no one measured. He didn't hurry. He moved with that lazy Halloween patience. Ring, wait, step back to the mat, tilt the mask just enough that breath could slip out, and not fog the nose slits. When a door opened, he made the sound of a younger brother, thin, high, a practiced lift at the end of trick or treat that sounded like he'd been taught to be polite. The paper sack stayed open with his left hand. His right hand never quite bent at the knuckles. People noticed and forgot. There was a new baby somewhere crying down the block. There were Dodgers rumors on radios even though the Dodgers weren't here yet. There was the warm smell of cut lawn and a neighbor grilling late. He turned his head like a person who could see through the rubber. At the corner house with the heaviest steps, he didn't ring. He waited for the door before his finger reached the bell. He knew the timing of certain households, how long a deadbolt takes when the hand is old. He shifted his weight to the right heel and listened to KFWB from a kitchen, a DJ doing a candy count, a sponsor for toothpaste. The door opened the way doors open for kids, halfway first, then wider when the adult sees the cape and feels safe. The woman laughed and held out a mixing bowl. "Take 2, she said, like everyone said. He set his sack under the light and reached with the straight, careful hand. 2, then a third that stuck to the wrapper of the second. She didn't mind. People forgive small extras on Halloween. He nodded and turned, but not fully. He turned the mask first, then the shoulders, then the feet, like the pieces of him agreed to move on delay. At the next house, he did not ring twice. At the one after, he did. In the mirror of a storm door, the devil looked like any kid who had decided to be bold. Different houses saw the same shape with small changes. Cape a little longer, sack a little fuller, mask a little shinier, like it had just been wiped. He stepped off a curb without checking. A passing sedan braked too late and not at all. There was no need. He was already across. A father with a Polaroid on the porch pointed the camera and asked the kids to stand by the pumpkins. The devil stepped into the edge of the frame the way static sometimes does. The father pressed the shutter. The flash lit everything evenly, and for a second the devil's mask threw back a white line where the seam ran down the chin. The father blinked and pushed the print into the air to develop. By the time the colors started to bloom, the devil had turned toward the next door, the paper sack opening its mouth for more. He made the first loop on the south side of the street, then the second on the north, but to 5 houses he felt like the same pass. They would tell each other later, on porches with sweaters pulled from closets at last, that a tall kid came early, before the little ones had formed their safety herds, and that his bag sounded empty the whole time. Paper sacks tell you the truth. Candy makes a gravel noise, apples thump, pennies shiver. His sack was quieter than a pillowcase. At Mrs. D'Amico's he stood where the steps stop and the porch starts, a full shoe length back, like someone had showed him how far to keep. She pressed a wrapped caramel into his bag and watched it slide to the bottom without finding anything else to hit. "You better get moving," she said, smiling. "The good bowls will be empty." He nodded, but the nod came late, after the smile should have been returned. At the duplex with the painted awning, the left side gave out Necco wafers and the right side Tootsie Rolls, but both remembered his height. The left woman said, "Basketball?" to be friendly. He lifted the sack like it was an answer. The right man asked where he went to school, and the devil mask turned just enough to catch the porch light on the cheek ridge. The man forgot the question and offered another candy to fill the blank he had made. At the 4th house, he skipped the chime and knocked with the straight hand. The sound was off, dull like cloth. From behind the door, a radio carried a dance tune, the treble all hiss. The occupant called 1 second, and then, when the chain slid back, she opened to a boy who didn't bounce on his toes and didn't look at the bowl first, like kids do. She put 2 small chocolates in the bag and waited for him to say, "Thank you," but he didn't. He bowed a fraction. The radio hiccuped with a tone, a clean sine note that lasted longer than a station switch, then went back to drums like nothing had happened. He crossed to the 5th porch, a bungalow with a tile step repaired last week. He did the ring, wait, step back rhythm perfectly, and added a polite "ma'am" that made the woman inside soften. When she dropped candy, she felt the odd urge to warn him to stay with friends. "Lots of cars tonight," she said. "Look both ways." He dipped his chin. His mask's mouth smiled the way rubber smiles, fixed and safe. She watched him leave and felt like she had seen him arrive again. When she closed the door, the handle caught on the deadbolt like her fingers had forgotten the direction. Between porches, he didn't swing the bag. He carried it like groceries you don't want to bruise. At the corner, he paused where the sidewalk buckled from tree roots, shifted the bag to his right hand and back to his left, then kept walking. A stray dog came up, curious, nose testing the candy-sweet air. The devil bent his head as if he would hold out a treat, then chose not to. The dog stopped, sat, and let him pass with ears flat the way dogs do for things like thunder. Up the block, a father with cigarettes rolled in his sleeve asked the tall kid who he was supposed to be. The devil turned enough to listen. "Just trick or treat," the father said, and laughed at his own line. The devil made a sound the father heard as a laugh too, but in the second after it, he wasn't sure there had been air in it. He shook his matchbook, scratched a light, and by the time the sulphur became smoke, the boy had stepped into the glow of a different porch. On Pico, the dime store clerk had cut a sheet of butcher paper into smaller squares to wrap last-minute makeup kits and rubber bats. She had rung up cowboys and skeletons and one pirate who looked like he'd borrowed his eye patch from a real uncle. Near closing, before the gate rolled down, a quiet figure set 3 things on the counter: the rubber devil mask with the molded crease, a second paper grocery sack folded flat, and a rubber hand, the kind you slip over your own to make a bad joke in a handshake. She remembered the way he pointed. He didn't say prices, he touched. When she said the total, he set down exact change, but waited with his fingers on the nickels like he expected the coins to move. She wrapped the mask loose so it wouldn't keep the box smell. He didn't take the twine she offered to tie it. "You sure?" she asked, and he gave a small nod that could have meant yes, or could have been the neck, trying to remember yes. The bell over the door called him out, but she didn't see him on the sidewalk from the register window. The bus stop was empty, the reflection was only the store's fluorescent row. She wiped her hands on her apron and wrote the time on her pad, out of habit, 7:04 p.m., because the manager liked notes when the drawer came up odd. It wouldn't. The change had been exact. She wrote it anyway because sometimes the notes explain things that turn out not to be about money. Now, while the street did its Halloween loops, she told the teens sweeping the aisle about the buyer. "Tall kid," she said, then shook her head. "Not a kid." She tapped her finger on the counter in a metronome that matched the buzz from the sign outside. The teen asked what was wrong with the mask. "Nothing," she said. "It's the rubber. It takes a crease from storage and needs steam." She looked at the hand display and counted. 1 missing. The box under the counter was open, but the lid was back on like someone had fixed their own mistake. Across town isn't far on a warm night with few buses and fewer people watching. The mask was on a face now, and the crease looked like a healed cut. A line old photographs give men who work in the sun. The second paper sack came out folded perfect as a new shirt. He slid the first inside the second, and when he opened both, they made a thicker mouth that held shape without fingers. He learned that quickly. He had the kind of touch that finds a trick and keeps it. The clerk turned the register key to Z and listened to the gears count her day. The teen locked the display case with the cheap jewelry and found the key did not want to turn, as if the teeth had changed a half step. They left through the side door, pulled the gate with 2 hands and heard a late step behind them, shoe leather on concrete, carefully placed. She looked and saw nobody there. Only a paper scrap moved near the curb, lifting and laying down again like a breath under the street. She told herself it was the warm Santa Ana air starting up. She told herself the tall boy would be a story for a week and then go the way porch stories go. She didn't know 5 houses on a side street would say his bag made no sound at all. The father on the middle lot had made a small station for himself. A pumpkin at each stair, a bowl of mixed candy on a chair, and a Polaroid on his knee. He liked order. He liked to line up the kids so the house number showed in the frame, a neat record of who came by this year. He had taken 3 pictures already, 2 pirates and a princess, with the kind of patience people have when the air is warm and the night is easy. The devil with the crease in his chin stepped into the edge of the light the way a cloud steps toward the sun. The father lifted the camera. "You there, hold," he said, friendly, but shaped like a command. The devil held. He did not fidget. He did not angle the sack to show it off or tilt his head to seem cuter. He simply stood where the stoop ended and the mat began, cape touching the threshold like it had learned the house first. The father framed him. He liked to see the porch number, the pumpkins, the boy. He pressed the shutter. The lens made its small snick. He reached for the tab and pulled the white tongue smooth, then the second tab, to bring the sandwich of paper and chemistry free. Habit said count to 60. Habit said wave the print a little, even though the store clerk had taught him it did nothing. He counted anyway. At 20, he held it up to the porch light and watched the grey crawl in from the edges. At 30, he heard a thin laugh from farther down the street and thought it was the devil's, though the figure on his stoop hadn't changed shape at all. At 55 seconds, he peeled. The top sheet came away with a sigh. The picture under it should have held a boy, a porch, 2 pumpkins, and a neat black number screwed to the post. It held an empty mat and the lower halves of the pumpkins. The place where the cape would have draped was a soft smear like breath on glass. The porch number was there. No, it wasn't. He blinked, brought the print closer, then farther. He checked the roll on the camera door as if a label could explain a trick. "Hold still, one more," he said, and the devil did not nod or disagree. He stood the same way. The father reset the flash and felt a small sting in his ear, like pressure had changed. He pressed the shutter again. This time the white tabs came stubborn. He had to pull twice. He counted slower. He smelled the chemistry, that sharp inside smell that clung to fingertips all evening. He thought of how he would tell his wife about the mistake later and make a joke about hands and patience. He peeled at 65. In the second print, the devil stood where he should, cape falling, mask catching a thin line of porch light along the crease at the chin. The pumpkins looked a touch brighter, as if the first failure had taught the flash to try harder. The porch number showed plain 1236. The father felt foolish for the worry. He handed over 2 chocolates to cover his own nerves. "Say thank you," he prompted out of habit. The devil's head tipped a fraction, not up, not down, a kind of middle that wasn't refusal and wasn't thanks. The father set the bad print on the chair next to the candy bowl to dry, certain it would fade itself into sense with time. He tucked the good one under the camera strap where the film door made a neat pocket. He told the boy to have fun, to watch for cars, to stick with friends. He realized he had said those words to an empty space because the devil had already stepped off the stoop without the sound of feet. A minute later, a cluster of smaller kids came. A cat, a cowboy, a sheet ghost with eye holes too far apart. He lined them up, clicked, pulled, waited, peeled, smiled. Everything worked the way cameras work. The failed frame went no farther than grey. It stayed grey even when he held it near the porch bulb. It stayed grey when he tried the kitchen light. It stayed grey when he turned it over and checked the back for a thumbprint that might have pressed the chemistry wrong. He slid it into the junk drawer by the phone, meaning to ask the photo counter about it tomorrow. Down the block, the devil turned his head to a window as if a picture had been taken behind him. The sack gave a quiet paper sigh. The porch number at the father's house, screwed straight for years, had eased a degree left without anyone touching it. The father would not see that until morning. Tonight, he only noticed that the good print looked a little too sharp, the way things look when they've been drawn twice. He tucked it safe and went back to lining kids where the mat ends and the numbers keep order. At the four-way near the elementary school, Mrs. Hollis wore her white sash and held the red paddle like it made a shield in warm air. She had stayed out late because Halloween pushed sundown farther than the sun did. Kids in small groups drifted between porches and the corner store. Older ones moved in pairs that pretended not to be pairs. She liked the order of the intersection, the way cars hesitated when they saw the sash. the way a lifted hand settled everyone down to the same rhythm. She saw him first as height, a head above the cats and cowboys, half a head above the pirates. The cape read cheap but neat. The mask was a dime store devil done careful, chin crease catching a shine from the streetlight. He wasn't running. He wasn't teasing the little ones either. He came to the curb and stopped exactly one shoe back from the gutter, a good habit learned from someone patient. "Hold," she said, because she always said it. The paddle went up. A Packard slowed, then a Ford behind it, then the quiet space that means go. "All right, sweethearts," she added to the smaller cluster. "Straight across, no skipping." The devil stepped off with them, neither first nor last. He kept the paper sack on his left and matched the pace without looking at anyone. Halfway through the crosswalk, a child to her right made a joke about devils not needing to look for cars. The devil's head turned a little, as if to listen. A sound came from behind the mask. Light, a chuckle you could miss under tire hiss. It was the right shape for a kid's laugh, but it carried something older under it, an edge you hear in men who work nights. Mrs. Hollis felt it first in her ear, a weight like when an airplane passes and presses the sky down. Then it was gone. The little ones didn't notice, the cars did not inch. She realized she had put the paddle higher than usual. They reached the far curb clean. "Thank you," said the cat, polite and small. The devil did not repeat it. He lifted his chin like someone acknowledging a toast. She saw the straight right hand again, fingers that didn't fold at the knuckles. She told herself it was a stiff glove or a trick for a costume contest, the kind boys liked when they wanted to be strange on purpose. He waited at the corner for the light that wasn't a light, just her hand this side and Patience that side. A bus cruised past with Beverly in the window, empty enough to show seats like teeth. She looked to the devil to wave him on. He was watching her, not the street. Under the eye holes, the rubber shadowed his cheekbones, and the crease at the chin made its small white line again. She cleared her throat. "Go on," she said, soft. He went. When she turned back to the middle of the road, the sound returned, not a laugh this time, but the end of a word, low and rounded, a syllable that didn't belong to a child's mouth. It slid under the tire noise and the shoe scuff and found the part of her that kept times when the bell rang, when the whistle blew, when children needed to be told to use their walking feet. She searched for the voice among the group. The cat and the cowboy had started comparing candy bars and arguing about which houses gave pennies. The devil was already 3 doors up, moving without the swing kids have when they're pleased. "Be safe," she called after habit. "Watch for cars." The devil did not look back. A porch lit and then dimmed. Someone's radio ran a commercial with a jingle that should have been bright, but the notes had a long tail, like the sound went somewhere before it arrived. At the next red, she checked her watch and found the crystal fogged a little on the inside, the way it does in winter, only the night was warm. She rubbed it with her thumb and it cleared. The bus came back the other direction with the same sign, same driver's cap visible in the mirror. She told herself intersections do strange things to sound. She told herself some boys teach themselves stage voices from records and practice on nights like this. She went home an hour later by the quiet route behind the school. On the playground, the painted crosswalk lines looked whiter than usual in moonlight and stopped halfway to the fence, like someone had peeled them up and laid them back down short. In the distance, a laugh tried to be small and young. The ending of it stayed heavy in her ear, like a coin resting on the drum. The landlord at the 4-unit on Ogden kept a ledger on a nail by his kitchen phone and a ring of keys that chimed when he breathed. He liked Halloween because it put people on porches, which kept loiterers moving. He did not like that the vestibule light had flickered since Tuesday. He had written bulb in the margin of his ledger and circled it twice, as if circles could send current. At a little before 8, a knock came that did not belong to the building. Tenants knock like they live there, 2 short, pause, 1 for the friend upstairs to answer. This was 3 measured taps, spaced like a metronome. He lifted the chain and looked through the peephole. The fisheye turned the hallway into a bowl and set the door across from him at the far curve of it. In the middle stood a devil mask, chin crease pale, where the porch light from outside fell through the vestibule glass and stretched. The figure held a paper sack at the hip. The sack made no roundness against his side, only a flat, careful board, like a folder, tucked to keep neat. He considered not answering. Children ring buzzers. This one had not tried the buttons. This one had found the private door and knocked with courtesy a tenant might recognize. He cleared his throat, which reminded the hallway he was there. The knocking repeated, same 3 beats, same spacing. He watched the hand through the peephole then, because sound told him what eyes had missed. The knuckles did not shape, the fingers did not fold. The hand rose as one piece and set down a polite, dull thud, as if cloth cushioned bone, as if rubber took the echo and kept it.
"Already gave," he called, not unkind. He kept his voice pitched to carry and soothe. "Kids go next door, lady with the bowl." The devil's head lifted a fraction, a listening motion. Through the glass, the landlord saw the mouth of the mask, fixed in a good-natured smile, the kind sold from a hook behind a counter. Behind the mask, something breathed without showing at the eye holes. He knew the trick of masks. He had worn one in the war once for a drill, a canvas thing that made the world tin. This one made the hallway long.
He did the chain. He let the door open the width his shoulder allowed. The devil did not step forward. He stood where the runner rug ended. The landlord smelled nothing, no talc from store rubber, no dust from a cheap cape, no sugar that clings to a child who has eaten on the walk. It was a clean absence, like the hall had been wiped. "Trick or treat," said the figure, the lilt shaped right, the vowel too round for a kid. The landlord reached to the dish near the phone and found 3 mints wrapped in green cellophane because he hadn't prepared. He put them into the open sack and heard them find bottom with a small, perfect sound. Alone. The sack did not settle or fold around them. It kept its rectangle. "You from the big houses?" he asked, making conversation to give the world more edges. "Up by Whitworth. Little late for our block." The devil tilted his head. Through the peephole, the landlord had seen a shadow on the opposite wall that did not match that tilt. A lag, like the light, had to think. Up close, he saw the crease at the chin shine a white thread again, like a healed cut. He noticed then, because the hallway gives you time to notice, a scuff mark near the bell plate where knuckles usually knock. Tonight, the scuff was lower and flat, a palm's width, as if someone had practiced knocking with the hand made into a paddle. A radio leaked from upstairs, KFWB, the DJ sliding from a song into a joke. For a second, the band dropped out and a tone came through like a level being set. The landlord felt it in the door, a soft agreement in the wood. He blinked and the music returned, a commercial with a whistle at the end that took too long to die. "Move along," he said, gentle. Lots of houses still lit. The devil neither nodded nor shook his head. He did that middle thing again, an acceptance without content. When he turned the mask first, then the shoulders, then the feet. The cape brushed the runner and did not make sound. The landlord watched through the peephole as the figure passed the vestibule glass. Streetlight striped the cape. The hand with the sack lifted to touch the door across the hall, not knocking, just to lay on, as if to learn the grain. The peephole lens cooled under his eye. In that sudden way glass can, like someone had blown on it from the other side. He wiped it with his sleeve and looked again. The hallway was empty except for the scuff by the bell plate and 3 green mints shining at the bottom of a bag he could no longer see. He closed the chain and wrote "replace bulb" again in the ledger, darker. On the line below, without meaning to, he added "hand didn't bend," and then crossed it out because there is no column for that. In the stairwell, steps went down with care and went up with care at the same time, the old building playing tricks with its own echo. He listened until the echo learned which way to go and left him with his keys and the quiet, the kind that makes a door feel heavier in your palm. Before dawn, the city cooled enough to remember it had a morning. The milkman on this part of Fairfax worked the way men with glass freight work, careful wrists, soft knees, a rhythm learned from porches that slope and gates that stick. He drove a white panel truck with hand-lettered script on the door and a rack that sang a bright little clink at every gutter dip. Halloween made late nights. It did not move his route. He liked the hour before radios. He liked a street that let rubber whisper. He found the first oddness on Ogden, where the 4 unit sat with its vestibule light flickering. On the top step, something had dusted the paint a pale grey, not ash, not flour. He was the kind to test with a fingertip. The pad came up sweet. Sugar. Not the powdered kind bakers sift, but table sugar crushed under weight until the crystals died. He wiped his fingers on his apron and set 2 bottles where the ledger said 2A prefers door left. The cap rings were quiet in the warm air. 2 houses down he found more, little dunes of sweetness against the riser, a line across the walk where someone had dragged a sack that leaked a steady patience. He imagined a child with candy too eager to carry neat. He imagined a teen who'd learned a prank with a bag from the pantry. He pictured a kitchen this morning, missing 5 pounds of dessert. He followed the drag to where it hiccuped, stopped, started again. On the Matson's step, the sugar lay flat and showed prints. He knew shoe bottoms the way mechanics know engine notes. He saw no heel tooth, no herringbone, no coin circle for grip. The impressions were clean and plain, the shape a dress shoe would make if the sole were new and never scuffed, the kind of sole you don't give to a child because it slips. The toe mark ran narrow and straight. Between one print and the next, there was less stride than a man his size would make. He crouched, set a hand near, and found the sugar cold in the pre-dawn the way breath makes a window cold. He stood and listened to see if a house would tell him the story. Doors do talk in the morning, screens complain, chains remember. Tonight, the porches kept last night's tone. At the corner, he heard the faint whistle of a Helms driver 3 blocks over, 2 notes they teach to bring kids to the curb with nickels. It bent in the air like a straw in warm milk, stretched thinner, then snapped back to right. He stacked 4 cartons for the family, with twins, and turned to go. His foot brushed sugar into a seam at the step, and the crystals made a sound like sand in a child's palm, dry and close to the ear. He swallowed a memory of his own boy putting too many spoons in his cereal and overfilling the morning. When he reached the bungalow with the tile step repaired last week, the sugar trail thickened, then ended at the mat as sharply as a line drawn with a ruler. The mat's ribbing held a rectangle where a bag had rested without sagging. He touched the doorframe for balance and felt a smoothness at doorknob height, a polish that didn't match the rest of the paint. He set a bottle down, reached for the second, and noticed 3 green mints stuck to the sugar at the edge, wrapped in cellophane, their corners barely pressed. He smiled at the stubborn path of candy and set them on the sill like lost coins returned. On Crescent Heights, a porch bulb had given up in the night, leaving the entry blue with sky. Sugar glittered there like frost, only this side of warm. In it he saw a stop that was not a stop. The prints came, paused, then layered themselves again as if someone had tried to learn how standing works. He looked for a scrape where a knee would mark a stumble. The sugar had no knee. He backed down the steps without turning his back to the door, the way a man does who has taught himself to be polite to things he can't name. He finished the block by habit, bottles where bottles belong, caps checked, notes clipped under clothespins, and circled to Pico for coffee he didn't need. The corner market had its gate half up, and the clerk yawning with a broom. Some kid opened a sack of C&H on the way home, the milkman said, trying on light talk to make the dawn fit. The clerk gestured at a paper bag split from seam to seam near the counter, and a trail from it to the door. "Not here they didn't," he said. "That one broke at 4. The milkman glanced at his watch, 4:18, and found the minute hand a hair slow, like it had dragged through sugar too. He took his coffee black and stood in the doorway looking at a street that pretended to be new. The trail he'd followed didn't exist this side of the threshold. It started again on the sidewalk, like the night had erased itself between tile and curb. He told himself kids carry sacks wrong. He told himself a shoe can be new and plain. He told himself the morning only feels strange because Halloween leaves shapes behind. He climbed into his truck, set the bottles to sing, and rolled on. Behind him, a small wind lifted a sugar print as neatly as a hand might and laid it down 2 doors away, same size, same distance, like a lesson repeated, like someone practicing not to leave a mark. On the front step of a duplex off Pico, a teenager sat with a pocket transistor the size of a sandwich, ear cord looped under his collar to hide it from a father who didn't like noise. The dial was set to KFWB. The DJ had just finished a toothpaste spot and dropped the needle on something bright when the song clipped out like someone had pinched the groove. In its place came a clear, even tone, no hiss, no wobble, not the fuzzy sound of a station lost, but a line you could draw with a ruler. He counted without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the music returned at the exact word it had left, as if a hand had paused a record no one owned. Across the street, in a kitchen with a radio shelved above the bread box, a mother stirring chili felt the same tone in her ear before she heard it in the speaker. The ladle's metal rang a little against the pot, as if something had tuned the room. She looked toward the window and saw a devil mask in profile at the neighbor's porch, chin seam catching a thin strip of porch light. The boy, if he was a boy, stood with his paper sack open and his right hand held like a board. The kitchen radio hummed its pure note for a count you could not call seconds exactly. It was more like breaths. Then the jingle came back, bright and silly, embarrassed to have been gone. 2 blocks over, a barber closing his door enjoyed the end of a ball game on a counter set. The announcer's voice flattened mid-sentence into the same test line hold. The barber, who knew what static was and what a bad tube was, put his hand on the cabinet to feel the transformer. Instead, he felt nothing change at all. The tone wasn't in the box, it was in the air. When it released, the announcer finished a word without noticing he had been paused. Out on Fairfax, the devil crossed at a mid-block like someone who knew where cars were without looking. The transistor kid watched him go through the gap in traffic and felt the tone catch the street a second time. He pulled the ear cord out so others could hear. But by the time the plug clicked, the song was back and the rhythm ordinary, the way a heartbeat is ordinary when it is yours. The father with the Polaroid on the middle lot kept his camera on his knee and his radio near the chair. He heard the tone too. It made the porch number over his head look a little soft around the edge, as if light had thickened. He thought of the grey print in his drawer. He turned the volume down and then up, to see if the tone belonged to his set. He found the volume changed nothing while the tone held, and everything when the station returned, like the world had been carrying the sound for the radio, not the other way around. The devil seemed to listen. At one porch he waited a heartbeat longer than the etiquette taught to children. His head tipped a degree toward the screen door, where a kitchen set rattled a newsman's voice. The tone came, held the width of 2 breaths, and let go. His sack sighed like paper does when a hand lifts out of it, even though his hand had not bent. He did the small middle nod and moved on. A delivery truck rolled past with its dash radio at a low mumble. The driver felt the tone in his jaw the way a dentist's office hum finds bone. He checked the sky without knowing why. It was clear and warm. He checked the station. The pointer sat where he had left it. He told himself, ionospheric skip makes tricks when the weather runs hot. He told himself, stations drift at night. Still he turned the knob a hair left and right, and found the tone stayed perfect through all the wrong places too, like a thread drawn straight across the dial. At the corner store, the clerk with the broom held the gate at his knee and watched the devil shape stop a respectful distance from a mailbox, cape falling quiet. The clerk's counter radio fixed into the tone and then snapped back to an ad that promised whitening without harsh abrasives. He laughed at nothing in particular and told the broom the city had funny nights. When the hour cut toward past, the tone grew shy, appearing only when the devil was near a window, a porch, a passing car with its glass down. Speakers shared it, but walls felt it first. The transistor kid, who had thought to call the station and complain, put the phone back on the hook. The line sounded normal, and that somehow made the tone feel less like trouble and more like a thing the night knew how to do. The devil lifted his mask a finger width at the chin to take air without fog and let it fall. The crease shone like the line the tone had been, thin, straight, and not handmade. He kept walking. The song on KFWB, whoever sang it, never once admitted it had been gone. The stray had a name on 3 blocks and none on its collar. Kids called him Buddy when they wanted him close and Shoo when their mothers looked out. He knew porches and days when milk arrived and when sprinklers learned to turn. He trotted the Halloween route like a deputy, head low, tongue out, tail an easy metronome. When the devil shape came into his lane, the tail paused, then forgot to resume. It happened near a jacaranda whose seed pods clicked when the night wind picked a page to turn. The devil stood at the bottom step of a bungalow with clean new grout. The bowl at the door had been left out with a note that said, "Take 2" in careful block letters. He did, and a third that clung like the second's paper had loved it. As he lifted away, the top candy bar slid from his stack and hit the walk with a sound too neat, a single, exact slap, no roll, no clatter. The wrapper was the milk chocolate kind with foil under paper, the ends twisted like little scarves. It lay parallel to the step, as if placed by a level. Buddy angled in because a found thing is a found thing. He drew close enough to cloud the wrapper with his breath. He waited for the sugar smell that sits in a dog's nose like a promise. He found warm concrete, bougainvillea from a fence, a child's sock forgotten earlier in the day, the ghost of lighter fluid from the man 2 doors down who grilled late. He did not find chocolate. He did not find paper. He circled because circling is how you make sure. The bar did not turn with his route. It kept its line to the step the way a compass keeps north. From inside the bungalow, a radio did its trick. Song, then the ruler-straight tone that belonged to no set and every wall. Buddy's ears went to the sound's edges and stayed there, the way dogs point not at what they hear, but at what their bones think about it. The tone held the width of 2 dog breaths and left. When it left, Buddy's hackles should have dropped. They did not. The devil watched as if the dog were a clock. He turned the mask a degree, then the shoulders, then the feet. He did not retrieve his candy. He did not shoo. He performed a small courtesy nod in the dog's direction. The middle nod he gave to people and moved along, sack at his left hip, right hand the flat, careful board. "Buddy, come on," a boy said from a porch across the street, because Buddy knows boys with pockets. Buddy flicked an ear but did not cross. He put one paw over the curb and drew it back, toes splayed. He sat. He tried a low whine that belonged to kitchens and inside doors. The bar did not answer, which is right, and somehow wrong, the way a thing is wrong when its silence points. An old man watering potted geraniums on a stoop called, "Leave him be, chocolate's bad for dogs." He said it the way a city tells itself it knows rules. The old man did not come down his steps. He wrapped the hose round the faucet and found the rubber slightly cool where it should have been warm. He pressed his palm to the step and felt heat. He hovered his palm over the candy and felt nothing, as if the air there ran thinner for a small, precise width. A girl in a sheet ghost costume tripped and laughed and saw the dog guarding something invisible from her angle. "What's he got?" she asked. Her mother said, "Nothing you need, honey," and tugged the pillowcase with coins at the bottom. The sheet swished, the mother's bracelets gave a soft choir, and they flowed past the bar with the easy blindness night grants on fun nights. Ants knew this street. They made pilgrim lines to drops and scraps, the sugar confetti of a holiday. They did not find the bar. One came to the edge of its shadow and lifted its antennae like testing rain. It turned away without radioing back a reason. Cars did their quiet roll. A bus with Beverly in the window let out a sigh that fit the corner. Buddy's tail made a single, uncertain tap against the curb and went still again. The jacaranda clicked. The porch with the Take Two sign turned its light off for a minute and back on, not because a hand touched the switch, because some nights lights think. Later, minutes, a half hour, time that stretches. Buddy stood, took 2 steps around the bar as if it were a sleeping animal, and chose the gutter over the walk. He passed within a snout's length of the paper and did not lower his head. At the corner, he looked back, because dogs do. The devil figure was 3 houses on, placing the sack with care under a new lamp. The candy bar lay where it had fallen, square to the step, ends neat, as if waiting for the ground to remember it and take a dent. At dawn the wrapper would be dull with dew and still unwrinkled. It would lift clean when the first shoe of morning came near, then settle back in the same place with a tidy, practiced patience. Tonight it only lay and did not smell, and a city dog who had eaten stranger things than paper gave it up, because some found things belong to the street, and some are not things at all. Buddy picked a different block and let his tail remember its job. In the second-floor front of a 1920s fourplex, Miss Green ironed a blouse she meant to wear Sunday. The window over her board faced west to a short street that ended in a chain-link fence where a schoolyard began. The side window by the dinette faced south to a narrow spur that never quite met the first, 2 streets with the same number on different signs, divided by a rectangle of city that had decided not to be a road. She liked the view because it made a small puzzle. She could watch neighbors turn one way and never appear in the other pane. At 8:15 by her kitchen clock, she saw the devil boy through the west glass first, cape tidy, sack squared, the rubber chin holding its pale seam like a healed line. He rang a bell, waited the way good children wait, and gave the middle nod when the door offered candy. She set the iron heel on its stand and moved to the side window to follow his route around the corner toward the spur he could not reach without walking 2 blocks and around the schoolyard fence. He was there already, same cape length, same careful left hand on the sack, same straight right hand that did not fold at the knuckles, no jog of breath, no hurry that would put a flush in a cheek if the cheek had been flesh. He climbed the stoop of the little bungalow on the south spur and tapped 3 times, evenly spaced, a polite metronome against painted wood. The door opened a hand's width, then more. She heard no words through glass, but she knew the script of Halloween and could lip-read thank yous on simpler nights. The mask tilted, not up or down, that midpoint that said he had heard and chosen neither answer. She returned to the west window to prove the trick. On that side, the devil was 3 houses on, already at the duplex with the striped awning. A child in a towel cape crossed in front of him and looked back as if the devil had spoken without sound. Miss Green looked down to the gap that kept the streets from meeting, the fence, the hedge, the maintenance yard with its locked gate. She found no path. She put her palm to the glass and felt warmth from her own room and nothing from the night. She fetched the little city map she kept in a kitchen drawer, the kind with bus routes marked and miniature one-way arrows. She laid it on the dinette and traced the dogleg around the schoolyard with her finger. Up, right, down, left. 4 minutes of walking if you were quick, 5 if you were human. The clock over the stove moved a single minute while the devil covered both panes. A radio on her counter, kept low for company, jumped to the clean tone and held. The iron's cord made a small hum on the board, like a joined wire. In the west window, the devil's chin seam caught porch light, thin, straight, manufactured. In the south window, the same seam took the same light from a different porch at the same time. She stepped between panes fast enough to test for lag, the way you test a mirror for breath. There was no lag. He was where he had just been and where he would be next. On the south spur, he reached for the bell with the straight hand and stopped, not touching, as if the door would open to the idea of a knock. It did. In the west pane, he accepted candy he did not seem to carry. Both sacks kept their rectangle, doubled paper lips holding shape without weight. In both frames he turned in his 3-part way, mask first, shoulders second, feet last, the body agreeing with itself on a delay. Miss Green tried a simple test. She raised her right arm in the west window as if hailing a cab. In the south window he did not mirror. He kept to his work. She clicked the counter radio off. The tones stayed a breath longer than electricity should, and then let go. She listened to the building, the upstairs neighbor moving a chair, the hallway bulb humming tired, and realized she could not hear children on either street now, only the low roll of a bus with Beverly in its sign passing nowhere she could see. She watched until the clock took another minute and both panes cleared. No cape, no sack, only porches remembering their pumpkins. On the ironing board, a damp sleeve had taken the shape of the iron's heel while the iron stood cold. She smoothed the fabric and found a crease like a line drawn straight with a ruler from cuff to shoulder, the kind a rubber mold would keep if kept folded too long. She wrote the time on the edge of the map, then circled the 2 dead ends that weren't dead tonight. When a policeman took statements about a tall kid and a paper sack that never sounded full, she would show him the map and say, quietly, that some routes are shorter for some people. He would nod the middle nod without knowing he had learned it, and outside her windows the 2 streets would keep not touching, the way the city says sensible, the way the night had not said at all. The Beverly ran a Halloween double, 1 monster, 1 rocket, because teenagers bought more popcorn when fear and space traded places. The marquee's red letters needed 2 bulbs apiece to feel brave. 3 were out, which made the word look older. A moth worked the O in tonite. The line bent along the sidewalk in an orderly river of jackets and skirts, paper masks perched on heads until the lobby rule, no masks inside, could take them. The ticket girl in her glass booth counted a small mountain of nickels from kids who had convinced parents late. She had a metal clicker that comforted her. One person, one click. The usher at the door had a roll of red stubs and a rip that made a small throat sound each time, a familiar, easy hurt. He watched the line because the manager liked it watched, and because on Halloween the city brought out tricks and bravado. He saw the first devil at the 10 spot in line, right after a couple sharing a jacket sleeve. The devil stood very straight, cape falling neat, paper sack held left in a square that did not grow fat with coins or candy. The mask looked dime store and careful, chin seam white where neon found it. The right hand stayed flat the way a kid will if he's carrying a fragile prize. The usher smiled at the costume and moved his attention to a vampire trying to ash a candy cigarette without lighting it. A minute later, he scanned again and saw the devil near the front. New place, same posture, 2 heads behind the varsity jacket with the B on the chest. The usher chalked it up to line slippage, kids trading places, a friend holding a spot. He looked for the jacket couple to confirm the shuffle. The couple stood where they had stood. 10 back, the devil remained. 2 back, the devil waited. The usher felt a small pressure in his ear, the way mountain roads do to a car. The ticket girl paused, counting. The radio on top of her booth, small, just loud enough for company, did its clean hold, the thin, ruler-straight tone that did not belong to any station and somehow to all of them. She glanced at the reflection in her glass, where the sidewalk wrote its own film. The devil's mask showed once near her elbow, and again near the slot where people pushed coins. She turned to the street. 1 devil. She turned to the glass. 2. The tone let go. The coins sounded heavier when they touched the tray, as if the air had learned weight and wanted to practice. Next, the usher called, and the front devil obeyed, stepping into the light under the portico. No masks inside, he recited. The devil lifted the chin a finger's width for air, then tilted the head in that middle nod that wasn't yes and wasn't no. The usher reached for the stub, tore, and felt the perforation separate without the paper's will, cleaner than it should, like the rip had already happened. He glanced at the number because he sometimes did, 0713. 3 places later, the second devil, no the same, offered a ticket that was already missing its corner. The usher frowned, not unkind, and took the remainder to throw away so the floor stayed less littered than it wished to be. He saw the number before it crumpled, so 713 again. The paper felt dry, like it had waited somewhere warm. He checked the roll in his hand for a misfeed. The roll was honest. The next unread tier wore 0714. Inside, the concession boy lined boxes like soldiers. The popper hissed and blew butter scent into the lobby, a cloud meant to flatten thought into appetite. His counter radio, tuned low, tried a song and struck the tone instead. He felt it in the plexiglass sneeze guard first, a shimmer of straightness you can see if you look through fingerprints. The devil passed the counter without turning for popcorn, which made the boy notice the hand, the flat board that didn't crease. The cape brushed the floor without whisper. The sack made that careful paper sigh as though a hand had left it and hadn't. A girl at the poster case tugged her date's sleeve. He was outside, she said, nodding toward the devil already inside. He's still outside, the date said, pointing back through the glass where the devil had not advanced. They laughed because the lobby taught laughter, because mirrors do tricks. The manager said, "Keep it moving," and wiped the glass with a rag that left a line as straight as the chin seam on the mask. The usher tucked the duplicate stub in his shirt pocket with the faint idea he would show someone who would find it boring and then throw it away. He checked the sidewalk one more time, found the devil at 10 again, then glanced back toward the inner doors, where the same cape slipped into the darkness of the aisle, as if the walls were doors if you stepped correctly. The clicker in the ticket booth kept count like nothing had doubled. The projector hummed a steady promise the way bees do when they agree to stay. When the feature rolled, a spaceship crawled across a painted star field. The house settled into its one breath. In row G, a child asked his mother why the screen looked a little sharper tonight. "Because we're close," she said. In the aisle, the usher's flashlight made a neat circle that should have shown dust and showed none. He touched the stub in his pocket and felt the impression of the number without feeling the paper. Outside, the line shortened the ordinary way. A bus with Beverly in its window sighed by. The tone did not return for a while. The devil did, when the lobby clock took a minute and gave it back, standing where a person stands when he knows every place a room can be entered, and chooses all of them in turn. The Beverly bus ran warm with windows cracked to a thumb's width and air that smelled of gum wrappers and radiator metal. The driver had his cap low and his right foot trained to the line between glide and stop. Halloween filled a city differently. It put kids aboard who rode one stop for the thrill and off again where porch lights doubled. He liked the small order of fares, the neat fall of coins into the box, the way a transfer printed its purple stripe true. He saw the devil at Stanley, a tall kid, cape tidy, paper sack squared, mask with a crease on the chin that shone like a straight pin under the street lamp. The driver eased the door lever and felt the bus drop half a breath as air changed places. The devil stepped up with the unhurried care of someone used to thresholds. Exact change met the fare box. 2 coins set down without clatter, the tone of them clean, like they had practiced. "Rear's open too," the driver said out of habit, though the devil was already in. The right hand that should have found a pole did not fold. It laid flat against the chrome with the palm like a paddle, as if the fingers were painted on. The paper sack kept its rectangle as the bus eased into gear. A small boy in a cowboy hat fogged his own mask at the eye holes with quick breath and wiped it with a sleeve. The devil's rubber did not cloud. The driver noticed because he watched glass for a living. They rolled through a pocket of kids and porch light. At Vista, a cluster climbed, witch, cat, angel, bringing heat and the soft damp of talk. The windshield took a film at the bottom edge that the demister chewed away in a straight bite. In the right mirror, the driver watched the devil's chin line hold hard and dry. He would swear later he waited for it to blur. He counted a slow 4 while the bus idled at a red and saw nothing change around the mouth. Rubber sweats on warm nights. This did not. Halfway to Gardner, the bus gave a small, joined hum that did not belong to engine or axle. The driver felt it through the wheel, a ruler-straight tone that did not wobble when he feathered the throttle. A transistor in a woman's purse picked it up and held it for 2 breaths. Her radio returned to a jingle like it had never been away. The pull-cord bell rang from the rear, one polite ding, and the driver checked the mirror. The devil stood by the back door, same posture, sack squared. In the glass of the front door, the devil still stood near the stanchion. He blinked, and the 2 places agreed again, the way a picture and its reflection make peace when you decide not to look for the seam. "Back door," he called, because he always called it. The devil gave the small middle nod that wasn't yes and wasn't no and did not get off. A girl with crepe paper wings did. The driver handed a transfer to a man who didn't ask for one and found his printer roll had skipped a number and then printed it again. He tore both and smoothed them with his thumb. The duplicates read true, same ink density, same ragged edge like a tooth, copied twice. At Sweetser, a gust came down from nowhere and pressed kids' costumes to their legs. The bus windows fogged a second in small ovals wherever faces had been near the glass. A clown left a perfect circle. A vampire left two crescents where the plastic teeth changed breathing. Where the devil had stood by the door, there was no oval. There was only the straight, pale line of a wipe, as if someone had drawn a finger once, chin to throat, and nothing else had touched. The driver tested the stop with a gentle brake and a later, firmer one to see how people planted. The devil's sack did not swing. The right hand stayed flat on chrome and did not lose its grip when any hand should have. At Fairfax, the devil stepped down to the curb, turned the mask first, then the shoulders, then the feet, and made the small courtesy nod toward the driver's shield. The driver nodded back without wanting to and felt the lever warm under his palm. He pulled away and watched in the overhead mirror because mirrors are a driver's second set of ears. In the back glass, for a stretch as long as a breath held too long, the devil's face rode with the bus, mask dry, seam catching porchlight, though the body stood on the curb. Then the reflection remembered how glass works and left him the street, the ad cards rattling, and his own eyes. He rubbed the heel of his hand once across the lower corner of the windshield and left a fog print that faded like a good bus should. The place where the devil's chin had been stayed clear, as if it had never learned how. He told himself, Los Angeles runs warm and some rubbers don't sweat. He told himself, Halloween makes drivers look too hard. He would swear later, quietly, and only when asked, that the mask didn't fog and the glass around it did. The boy with the varsity B on his chest had a habit of being decent when nobody was looking. He and his girl had made the Beverly double, rocket first, monster second, then drifted out under the portico to cool off because theatres run warm no matter what posters promise. The night held a soft heat. The jacaranda by the curb clicked its seed pods like a pocket watch that forgot numbers. The devil stood at the edge of the crowd where the portico light failed. Cape neat, sack squared. The chin seam on the rubber caught a white hairline from the neon. He did not shiver, but he stood the way someone stands when taught to look like he might. The girl nudged the boy with the bee and tilted her head. "He's cold," she said, though she had to know he wasn't. The boy shrugged out of the jacket because some motions live closer to muscle than to thought. He stepped in, kept a hand on one sleeve, offered the other, the way a person does when helping a friend find the armhole. The devil did the small middle nod that wasn't yes and wasn't no. The right hand stayed flat, the left hand held the sack. The boy found himself dressing the stranger from one side, sliding leather over cape cloth that did not catch. The jacket settled without weight, like a thing placed on a chair back. He waited for the warm push a body returns when wool meets shoulder. None came. "Bring it back," the girl said, teasing the way a girl does when she wants her boy to be both kind and careful. "Trade you a popcorn for it," the boy said, to make a rule. The devil looked at him through the mask the way a reflection looks at you when you check a window twice. KFWB on the Ticket Girls radio jumped to the straight, clean tone and held 2 breaths. The jacket's collar under the boy's fingers felt cool the way metal feels cool in shade. Then the song returned and laughter filled the place it left. The devil did not go into the theatre. He did not go away. He turned the mask first, then the shoulders, then the feet, wore the letter B for the space between 2 streetcar sighs, and stood with the sack squared, jacket open, like a picture in a school yearbook you can't place. The girl squeezed the boy's hand. "He's taller with your coat," she said, which made no sense, but sounded right because the night made room for wrong rightness. A bus went by with Beverly glowing in its face. The devil was there in the glass a blink longer than he was on the sidewalk, the letter bright, and then gone. The boy felt a sudden, silly pinch of protectiveness for the stupid jacket he wore, to ball games and to make his father proud. "Hey, okay," he called, not rude. The devil turned that middle nod again and stepped toward him in 3 small agreements: mask, shoulders, feet. The jacket lifted off the devil's shoulders without hands. The boy would swear later he did not tug. The leather sleeves forgot the shape they should have kept. He was holding it. The devil had it. Then he had it again. "Thanks," the boy said, because fathers teach words before reasons. The leather felt like it had been in the icebox. He slipped it on and waited for the smell that made things yours. Hints of popcorn oil, the thin ghost of his father's menthols from the ride over, a smear of his own cheap cologne that the girl had called fine. Nothing came. The wool had no night in it. The leather had no day. It was a blank square of cloth shaped like a jacket. "You switch it?" the girl asked, half laughing, nose wrinkling by habit to find him in the sleeves. She found nothing. "You always smell like you," she said, embarrassed at the smallness of it. She pressed her cheek to the shoulder anyway. "It's clean," she decided, then failed to make clean sound like good. He checked the pocket because jackets tell on pockets. No theatre ticket stubs, though he was sure he had kept 2 for luck. He found 1 red half with a ragged tooth, 713, and another red half with the same tooth and the same number, ink density matching like the paper had learned to be a pair. He put them together and they did not make a whole. He smiled, then didn't.
"Give him a candy," the girl said, because kindness likes change. She held out a wrapped caramel. The devil did not reach with the right hand. The left moved the sack like a mouth, and the caramel fell in and made that neat, alone sound. The jacket on the boy's shoulders stayed cold. He rubbed the collar and brought his fingers to his face to catch something. Soap, street, skin. The air had nothing to give.
Later, when he walked his girl home, her mother hugged him at the steps, the way mothers test boys with their hands. "You leave the jacket at the movies?" she asked, surprised that her palm found no boy in the wool. "No, Mum," he said. "It's right here." She squeezed and let go and wiped her hand on her apron without knowing she had, as if she had touched glass and found it didn't fog. In his room, he hung the jacket on the chair back and leaned in to breathe it like a secret. The house held ordinary smells: coffee, linoleum, a radio 2 doors down trying to stay on station, but the jacket had none. In the pocket, his stubs made the same number twice. He slept with the window open to let the city in. The jacket did not collect it. In the morning, his mother would say, "It doesn't need washing," in a tone that meant she didn't trust not needing, and he would nod the middle nod he had learned on a Halloween where things borrowed came back the same shape and not the same at all. On Hayworth, a woman with a brownie hawk eye liked to make small albums of Halloweens, porch steps, crooked crowns, costumes that would look braver in a book than they had felt in the warm air. She had the flash attachment clipped and a pocket of blue bulbs that made a little clink when she moved. "All right, 1 picture," she said, because children hear numbers better than permission. The radio by her door chased a song and then, as if warned, softened to a murmur. The devil stopped at the edge of her steps, cape neat, paper sack squared at his left hip. "Hold," she said, the way the Polaroid father had said it, and the devil held. She raised the brownie, thumb steady at the shutter. The bulb took its power with a tiny breath, a priming sound you feel in your teeth more than hear. She framed the pumpkins, the porch number, the boy. The crease on the rubber chin caught a white line where the porch light reached it.
"On 3, she said, for courtesy. 1, 2! The radio inside gave the clean, ruler-straight tone the knight had been practicing. 3, she pressed.
The bulb popped and made a small sun. In that bright instant her eyes did what eyes do. They grabbed all the edges. The devil's left hand held the paper mouth open, and in the flash there were 2 mouths, a second sack, where the first already was, both squared, both opening in the same hand without the hand having changed. They sat one behind the other the way 2 windows do in a reflection when the light finds both panes. The right hand, the one that never bent, stayed flat at his side, like it had been painted on. The flash smell came, hot tin and something green. Her vision wrote a white coin where the bulb had been, and then turned it into after-image ghosts that drifted and settled. She blinked hard the way people do to set the world back. There was the devil again, 1 sack only, the crease at his chin a pale stitch. The radio let go of the tone and returned to a toothpaste jingle that sounded embarrassed for having left. "Thank you," she said, "because manners can patch what sight can't." She reached into the dish and dropped 2 candies. They fell into the sack with the same neat, lonely sound things make when they find bottom alone. The sack did not lower.
"Another?" her neighbour called from the walk, holding up his own camera, a fixed lens job with a cigar smell in the strap. "Take one of me and Dora," he said to the devil, meaning a joke. He handed the brownie back to the woman when the devil did not take it. "No masks inside," he added out of place and laughed. She lifted the camera again because habit likes to be useful.
This time she did not count. The bulb took its small drink of current. The radio tested the thin tone for the width of a breath and decided against it. She pressed. The pop came, the white coin bloomed. For a slice of a second, 3 rectangles hung in the air where a sack should live. 1, 2, a third nested like a box you can't unfold. All in the same left hand, all correct and wrong at once. Then the room gave itself back and the devil stood with 1. The neighbour said, "You're spoiling me," and kissed Dora's cheek like people do in front of cameras to make time soften. She set the used bulbs in her pocket. With the edge of her thumb she felt where the glass had cooled to a skin that remembered being hot. The devil tipped that middle nod, turned the mask first, then the shoulders, then the feet, and moved toward the next porch. As he stepped, the storm door glass gave a double of him to the side, the cape twice, the sack twice, both left hands holding both mouths. Then the reflection made up its mind and chose one. Inside, she wrote the time on the little envelope that would hold the roll later, and a note on the flap. Devil, 2 bags? It looked silly once it was ink. She underlined it anyway. The radio, in apology, played a song she liked. Across the street, a girl in angel wings told her brother she had seen the bag grow and then shrink, and he said, "Bags don't do that," with the authority of boys who haven't yet met knights that make rules bend. When her prince came back tomorrow, she would show the neighbour a picture where the devil stood at the porch edge, and the straight line of the chin crease shone. The sack mouth would be open square. Behind it, faint as if an eraser had spared it twice, a second square would look ready to receive the same 2 candies, and the edge of a third would ride the seam of the first like paper, learning to be more paper. She would touch the surface with a careful finger and find no raised line where the extra lived. The clerk would say, "Light flare," and she would nod, the middle nod the neighbourhood had learned, then slide the print into an album where things line up and behave, and where a boy with a mask keeps holding a bag his hand should not have room to hold. The bungalow near Crescent Heights had put a new chain on in spring, when a rash of daylight salesmen taught people to invite less. The daughter had installed it herself with short brass screws and a penciled line on the jamb to mark where wood meets habit. On Halloween, the mother kept the porch light steady and the radio low on the counter, a soap jingle softening the dishes. The bell plate held a polite chime in stamped letters no one reads until someone tells them not to touch it. 3 taps came, measured even, the metronome knock the neighborhood had learned by now. She went to the door and set both hands on the cool painted wood the way people steady themselves to look through the eye. The devil mask filled the peephole's small world. A tidy cape, a squared paper sack left, the rubber chin seam catching a white line from the porch bulb like a sewing mark. The right hand hung at the hip, fingers unbent, a glove that did not make a glove's shape. "Just a moment," she called, because courtesy beats fear if you start it first. She slid the main bolt, left the chain, and opened to the width that brings air, but not entry. "Trick or treat," he said, the words shaped right, the vowels too rounded, like a man on a radio pretending to be young. She reached to the dish by the phone and chose 2 small chocolates for fairness. The sack's paper mouth made a careful square. The candies fell and found bottom with their own neatness. The sack did not lower. The radio on the counter did the thing it had started to do up and down the street. Music clipped out. The room held a perfectly straight line of sound that belonged to no station at all. No hiss, no wobble, a tone a ruler might hum if you drew it fast. She felt it in the plates before she heard it in the speaker. A rim sang a hair's width and stopped. The chain across the door went soft. It did not snap. It did not yank. It forgot weight. Brass links sagged into a long U and slid through their own keeper as if the slot had widened to match them. The plate on the jamb rested against its 2 short screws for the briefest pause, then settled straight down and kissed the threshold with the same exactness a candy bar had used to lie earlier, parallel to the sill, ends neat, as if a hand had levelled it. The door opened another inch, because houses are obedient when hardware forgets itself. She kept her palm on the wood. The devil did not press. He did the small middle nod that wasn't yes and wasn't no. The chin seam shone its thin line, the kind machines put into rubber in factories that do not care about Halloween. "We already," she began, meaning to say, "gave," but the word felt like it would ask something back if she finished it. Instead, she said, "Safe night," because mothers say safe when they mean go, and the devil's head tipped like a man acknowledging a speech that ended clean. The tone let go. KFWB returned mid-jingle with a smile it had not earned. She bent for the chain plate and found the screws bright along their threads, as if they had been untwisted under a cloth that left no scratch. The screw heads showed no driver bite, only the small factory cross the daughter had marked once with a pencil to get them straight. When she lifted the plate, it kept its level all the way up and set itself back against the jamb as if a wall knows where it prefers its jewelry. Outside, the cape moved without whisper. The sack made the dry sigh paper makes when a hand lifts out of it, even though the right hand had not bent. The devil turned in 3 agreements again, mask first, shoulders next, feet last, and took the first step down. On the tile, repaired last week, her eye found sugar crushed to dust from someone else's night. 3 green mints rested near the riser, corners barely pressed, like old news returned to the porch to see how it ended. "Stay with friends," she said, softer than soft through the space the chain had given. The devil neither nodded nor refused. He offered the middle and moved on toward a bus that sighed Beverly and a block that kept its heat. Later, when her daughter came by to check the porch bulb, they ran the screws in easily by hand, the threads catching as if the wood wanted them back. "You stripped these?" the daughter asked, half accusation, half care. "No," the mother said, because she hadn't. She touched the cross in each head and found it clean, a brand new idea in old brass. They tested the chain twice. It held both times the way chains do. That night, when the house settled and the radio clicked to off, the plate lay true against its line. On the floor, where it had rested parallel as a bar, the paint kept no mark at all, only a faint straightness in the dust, like a pencil drawn and then erased with a careful finger. The daughter brushed it with her sleeve by habit. The mother looked through the peephole once more, because people check doors as if eyes are locks. The mask was not there, only the porch numbers she had polished in the afternoon, 1 degree softer at the edge than they had been before the tone taught corners to think. On Fuller, a 3rd grade teacher kept the porch light steady and the candy honest. Miss Alvarez knew children the way a clock knows minutes. She kept a grade book on the hall table and a supply satchel by the door, red pencils, a paper knife, the small pliers she used to pull map tacks from cork without tearing the board. 2 weeks back she had signed for the new staples the district bought by the case, bright with a faint amber wash to resist rust, the memo said, and a chisel point that left tiny chevrons when you pried one back out. She had run a fingertip along a strip and learned their feel so she wouldn't drop them in front of her class. The knock came in 3 even taps. She opened on the chain because habit is a teacher's second spine. The devil stood where porch boards turn to threshold, cape neat, paper sack squared to the left hip, the rubber chin seam catching a white hairline from the bulb. "Trick or treat," he said, the lilt right, the vowel too round, like radio acting. She dropped 2 chocolates. They found bottom alone. The sack did not lower. She should have shut the door. Instead, the part of her that mothers and measures noticed the line at his chin. It was not a factory seam, not the faint ridge the dime store masks wore. This line held little bars of light at regular spaces, clean spans the length of a Staples crown. "Hold," she said, and the word came out like classroom. He held. She reached for her satchel without closing the door and brought the pliers because fixing is a reflex if you teach all day.
"Your mask," she said, fingertip hovering, not touching. He tilted his head the way her students did when they chose neither yes nor no. She lifted the rubber a finger's width at the chin to see if a thread showed. Starlight from the street and porch light together made a narrow, perfect theatre under the edge. The seam did not wear thread at all. It wore 12 staples set shallow, crowns bridging rubber to rubber, legs barely turned. The crowns had that faint amber cast she could pick from a drawer by feel alone.
Her core made a small, disobedient chill that did not reach her voice. "Someone did this with office staples," she said, gentle like you talk to children with untied shoes. "Not glue." She saw the spacing, not random, not a nervous hand. Even like 1/4 inches along a ruler. Behind her, on the kitchen radio, KFWB tried a song and turned instead to the ruler-straight tone the night had been trading up and down the block. The porcelain plates on the drain board thought about ringing and did not. The tone laid itself flat across the doorway. In the thin slice under the mask, the front 2 staples settled by the width of a hair, legs finding rubber like a press had reached them from nowhere. The pliers in her hand felt suddenly lighter, as if their job had been done 2 breaths ahead of them. She swallowed, which sounded too loud in her own head. "Where'd you get the mask, sweetheart?" she asked. Teacher out of her mouth because it belonged there. The devil made that middle nod, neither answer, and the staples shone their amber thread again. the way the districts do under fluorescence when you open the box. She thought of the cabinet at school, her key on a little ribbon, the ledger where she signed a strip to the PTA for posters, the neat weight of unopened sleeves. She had counted last Friday. She remembers counting. These are district, she heard herself say. And the word district felt private in a way porch words should not. She reached to flatten a proud crown with the pliers lip, a kindness to a child's cheek. The right hand at his side stayed aboard, fingers painted on. The sack sighed its paper sigh as if a hand had left it and hadn't. The tone let go. The radio resumed mid-jingle, bright and embarrassed. The staple she meant to press sat perfectly, even without her. She drew her hand back and found her pliers cooler than the air. "Careful with those," she said. "Nonsense teacher talk, for there is nothing useful to say." He tipped the head again, that practiced middle, and turned the way he turned. Mask first, shoulders next, feet last, the body agreeing with itself by steps. On the threshold, something else showed itself because rooms do favors to people who cannot stop noticing. At the edge of the rubber under the chin, caught by the staple nearest center, a paper thread clung, red, fibrous, a sliver of wrapper from a staple strip exactly like the district sleeves that shed red along the first crown when you break them. She saw it because she knew to see it. She did not touch it. The cape brushed her runner without whisper. He went. She shut the door all the way and leaned her forehead to the wood, the way teachers allow themselves one breath between bells. In her satchel, she counted a strip from her own spare box to prove something to her hand. 10 crowns bright with amber, paper red along one edge. 9 when she slipped, and 1 pinged to the floor. She found the lost staple by sound because she always did. It lay parallel to the baseboard, ends neat, like the chain plate had laid at someone else's house, like the candy bar had laid on someone else's walk, as if the night preferred straightness. She wrote mask, stapled, hours, in her margin notebook, because margins hold the parts the lesson doesn't. In the morning, she would open the cabinet and count and find the numbers correct and not corrected at all. Tonight, a bus sighed, Beverly, where she could not see it. The radio kept a song, and on her porch, the faintest amber glint stayed in the crack of the threshold wood like a staple crown, thinking about making itself flush. The radio repair shop on Pico kept its own weather. Even on warm nights, the back rooms smelled cool, rosin, cardboard sleeves for vacuum tubes, the faint metal breath of solder that hadn't been heated in an hour. On the pegboard, a Simpson multimeter hung like a pocket watch for the room. On the bench, a small oscilloscope idled with its green line flat and patient. Mr. Levin, who wrote times on everything, had 3 sets open, a Philco table radio that needed a new IF can, a suitcase record player with a tired motor, and a pocket transistor whose owner had complained it went thin and then held a note. He made notes the way people pray, quiet, precise, same words every time. On the work tag for the Philco, he wrote, "Inject 455 kc, a line when line calms." On the pocket set's tag, he underlined the time the boy had sworn the trouble happened. "About 7, Mum said." Mr. Levin checked the wall clock and wrote his own small weather, 6:59 steady, because he liked to be near to what other people meant. At 7:11 by his clock, the shop changed. The fluorescent over the bench brightened a hair, as if someone had turned the variac a degree, though no hand had. The Simpson's needle ticked and held, not a swing, an agree. The oscilloscope's patient green line rose into a sign that looked drawn by a ruler, 1,000 cycles if you believed in round numbers, smooth as if the sweep had been oiled. The Philco, powered through a bulb limiter, obeyed with a tone, even though its antenna was off, and his signal generator asleep. The pocket transistor on the mat returned the same clean note without regard for where its tuning dial sat. In the front room, a loose speaker on a shelf joined in from air alone, as if the room were the radio and the boxes were listening. He reached for the generator out of reflex and stopped, because he could feel the tone first in the wooden bench, then in the bones of his wrist, the way a good power transformer hums, only straighter. He looked at the wall clock to see if electricity had something to say about minutes. The second hand moved and then forgot to, resting its tip exactly on the one hash that made the 11. He counted because he always did. 1, 2, not seconds, breaths. At the third breath, the hand remembered and went on like a man finishing a word he'd left mid-syllable. On the pad he wrote 7-11 hold, then, because it mattered to him, added 2 breaths and underlined the 2. He tapped the Simpsons glass. The needle did not answer him until the tone let go. The oscilloscope sign flattened in an instant so clean it made the absence look like a line drawn with more care than the tone had used. In the front room, a neon radio TV sign in the window gave a single, slow exhale and returned to its small buzz. He set his hand on the Philco's chassis to feel heat. It was as it had been. The IF can did not sing when he thumped it with a pencil, the way a bad can will. The pocket transistor's earphone gave silence, the honest way a cone gives silence. Outside the glass door, a figure crossed the sidewalk, a tall devil boy shape the city had begun to pass from mouth to mouth, cape neat, paper sack square at the left hip, the chin of the mask holding a white seam that reflected window light like a wire. Mr. Levin did not bother with a customer's story voice. He spoke to the room. "All right," he said quietly, the way men tell machines that something has been observed. He tore a repair slip from his book and found the next number had printed twice, same ink weight, same scissor tooth. A small misfeed he could explain to himself if he wanted to. He tucked both under the Philco's tag to keep the evening in one place. He switched the Philco to his generator and spun the dial to prove the world could still be asked to do ordinary tricks. The tone he made for himself had wobble. Life. The small hair of noise that tells a person where sound ends. What had filled the shop at 7-Eleven had none. He wrote that down in his shorthand, no hiss in room tone, then circled it, because the phrase made him feel foolish and correct at once. When the minute took itself to 20, the front door breathed open and closed without the bell, like a draft had manners. He stepped out and saw no one on the sidewalk, only the paper square of a sack's mouth reflected twice in the glass before deciding to be one. Back at the bench, he underlined his note because the kind of night that needs underlining was happening. 7-11 hold, 2 breaths across all sets, line unchanged. He shut the lights at 9 and the shop kept its cool smell. In the window, the neon rested its red in perfectly straight letters that did not blink. He locked the door, tried it twice, wrote "locked" in the margin of his log because his hand liked the word, and walked home the long way. When he opened in the morning, his clock would read right, and his tags would still carry the same duplicate number. He would not throw one away. He would paperclip them together in a neat parallel and tell the first customer who asked that at 7-Eleven last night every set in the room agreed on a note no one had ordered, and that agreement is a kind of weather a man should write down. At the city's lighting yard, the night desk kept a map big enough to behave like weather. Blocks were pale green, arterials ran thicker. The schoolyard, Miss Green-faced, was a blank rectangle with a neat label. Over the paper lay a clear sheet for grease pencil marks. A clipboard held pre-printed slips, lamp out, buzz at head, photo eye stuck. Each with a number the printer sometimes doubled on cool nights. Mr. Cardenas minded the phones, wrote times like a habit says grace, and pushed coloured pins where callers lived. Halloween made more calls, but not the grumbling kind. Tonight they came courteous. Just so you know, the lamp at our corner blinked. Only a second. Back on now. He said, "Thank you, because the city likes to be told what it is doing." He wrote 7:06. Hayworth, out on 7:09. Fuller, out on 7:11. Ogden. Tone, on, because a woman had said the radio made a straight sound while the lamp lost itself. He underlined tone, even though it wasn't a lighting word. He stood with the grease pencil like a conductor and made small X's, one at Hayworth, one 3 blocks over at Fuller, one 3 more along at Ogden. He paused because the pattern looked like the map had taught itself scales. Light, light, out, light, light, out. He checked the card box for past reports, last week's, last month's, and found nothing this neat. The yard's fluorescent hummed the old hum, the kind with a wobble. For 2 breaths it forgot its wobble and held like glass drawn straight, then came back to itself. He wrote 7-Eleven shophold because machines deserve to be treated as witnesses. The radio to his left, city band, not music, stayed ordinary. The telephone did not. Between one ring and the next, he felt the tone in his jaw the way a dentist's office finds bone. The line lifted clean without static when he took it. "Stanley," said a woman. The lamp stepped out and in. He put the X where the map asked and noticed that from Hayworth to Fuller to Ogden to Stanley, a ruler laid across the overlay would touch every 3rd block, as if the city had been measured in 3s and someone had decided to underline. He phoned a crew he liked because they wrote legible. "Take the small truck," he said. "Mercury head on Hayworth. If it's out now, don't be heroes. Just note it." The crew rolled, their cab radio carrying KFWB in apology soft volume. When they parked, the lamp in question burned perfect. A boy in a sheet ghost laughed up the block. A devil shape watched from a porch, chin seam catching a white thread of light as if it were a wire solid to rubber. The crewman, who had changed photo cells for 17 years, tapped the lamp pole with his knuckles and felt the way things feel when they've recently agreed to something. "Photo cells new," he said into his handset. "Head's cool. No arc spit. We'll log it as momentary." The handset gave him a tiny, ruler-straight tone that wasn't the city band, and then behaved. Back at the yard, Mr. Cardenas slid the slip into the metal sorter and found the bin's label duplicated, Work Ord 22841, printed twice on the same tag, like paper learning to be 2. He kept both because throwing away a number seemed impolite on a night that liked to repeat. More X's arrived. Sweetser, blink and back. Gardner, blink and back. Every 3rd block, always aligned, sometimes along a street, sometimes turned a street over like a book being thumbed. He laid a straight edge over the overlay and saw the path miss the schoolyard, skip the rectangle the way the devil had skipped the chain link, then continue as if fences were a kind of light that doesn't count. He set a pin at Crescent Heights and wrote "out on," and felt foolish for writing the obvious word on in a city designed to keep it. He took his pencil cap off and on 3 times, a habit that made Rose feel answered. The tone came once more, not the radio, not the fluorescence, something in the drafting table that made the glass lay flatter for 2 breaths. The clock's second hand rested on the 11 and then remembered. He drew the last X at Beverly just as a bus with that word in its face sighed by the yard windows. On his map, every 3rd block wore a mark. Between each pair of marks, 2 blocks shone the way a breath between words shines if you've been listening too hard. "Pattern?" the crewman asked when he came to file his card. Mr. Cardenas did not say yes. He made the middle nod the night had taught the neighborhood and slid the overlay back across the paper with a motion as straight as his ruler. The X's lined so neatly they felt printed. He dated the corner in pencil, OCT 31, 7:09 p.m., and added a note meant for no one. 3s. Outside, another lamp tested dark and returned. On a porch, not on his map, a squared paper mouth sighed its dry little breath as if a hand had left it and hadn't. He was a sheriff's deputy by paycheck and a neighbor by habit, out of uniform because Halloween works better when a man blends. He carried a small spiral notebook in his breast pocket, a coin in his trouser change to time calls by flips, and the low hum of training in his head. Watch hands, watch feet, watch what sound belongs to what surface. The sound tonight was wrong. A gymnasium squeak where there was no gym, a varnished floor cry laid over dry sidewalk. He caught it first at Ogden. 1-2 squeak. Not wheels, not rubber soles finding rain. Dry. Every third step a thin, high kiss of shoe to floor that wasn't here. He turned once around himself like a man finding a cricket. The devil shape moved up the block with patient order. Cape tidy, paper sack squared to the left hip. Right hand a careful board that never bent. The chin seam caught porch light like a wire. The deputy matched pace across the street because watching diagonally keeps a man honest. He looked for the wet, sprinklers, kitchen rinse across a stoop, a hose left lazy. Nothing. He moved when the devil moved. 1-2 squeak. The squeak was not with him. It was with the figure, but not from it, arriving half a foot ahead of each third step, as if the ground had learned to anticipate. He wrote in his book without looking down, every third, squeak, dry. At Stanley, the tone came, the ruler-straight note the neighborhood had begun to share. 2 breaths of glass-flat sound and no wobble. While it held, the squeak forgot itself. Feet made the noises feet make, rubber, grit, a little slap from a child's cheap heel. When the tone let go, the squeak returned on count 3 like a metronome that had taken instruction. He said, "All right," to the part of the air that listens to men who say it, and flicked his coin. Heads for the north side, heads it was. The devil reached a crosswalk and did the ring. Wait, step back rhythm in miniature. Polite to the idea of traffic even where none came. The whitened lines looked a shade brighter tonight, the way Miss Green's had. 1-2 squeak, the squeak now exactly on the paint, as if the city had waxed it. The deputy put his own shoe there, heel then toe, dry leather over dry grit. On his third step, something under the rubber sang, brief, high, honest as a basketball court. He stopped, stepped off the paint. The sound went with the paint, not the man. "Evening," he said across the street, because men who are neighbors say it first. The devil gave the middle nod, not yes, not no. "What's in the sack?" the deputy asked, easy to feel how the voice laid on the figure. The paper mouth opened its square. The sack sighed the dry sigh paper makes when a hand leaves it, even though the hand had not bent. The deputy heard nothing settle, no candy roll, no penny chatter. He wrote, "Weight stays 0, and caught himself underlining. A bus with Beverly in its face let off a slow breath. In the windshield, the devil rode a blink longer than he rode the curb. The chin seam made its straight white line, a staple crown edge tipped to light. The deputy stepped to a storefront to watch the glass, watch the boy. 2 devils hung there for a breath, one by the soda cooler, one by the oranges, then decided to be one again, the way reflections do when you refuse to help them be strange. The squeak led him past the schoolyard fence that made Miss Green's 2 streets. He listened. The sound remembered a varnished floor, not chain link. 1-2 squeak, count true over the sidewalk. While inside the gym, a janitor 5 blocks away pushed a dry mop he'd swear gave the same cry. The deputy chalked a dot on the walk to test his counting. 2 clean dots, a third on the paint. He stood back. The devil walked. The squeak landed on the chalked third, like it had been invited. "Trick or treat," said the figure, the vowel too round for a child. The radio in a nearby doorway tried a song and held the tone instead. The squeak stopped obedient, then resumed. The deputy watched the right hand not bend and the chin seam keep its neat industrial white, and told himself men carry novelty hands on Halloween, told himself shoes can sing on dust if a finish is new, told himself you can hear a Jim through a fence on a warm night, if you're the kind who listens. At Crescent Heights he stepped ahead to cut the angle, to make the devil choose a side. The figure turned in its 3 agreements, mask first, shoulders next, feet last, and passed him with the small courtesy nod that makes people feel considered without saying why. On the 3rd step past, the squeak sounded by the deputy's own ear, though he had not moved. He put his palm to the concrete, warm from the day, dry. He put his ear low because men who check, sounds must sometimes look foolish. The squeak came again at the chalk mark he had made, a thin kiss of absent soul to not hear floor. He stood and wrote, last line underlined twice. "Squeak belongs to count, not shoe." The coin in his pocket cooled a degree the way small metal does when a room is learning a new note. A porch light blinked and returned. The devil's sack gave its paper breath without lowering. The deputy closed his book and kept walking with the block, counting in his head 1, 2, waiting for the 3rd to tell him where the night planned to step next. Mothers had said it all week, don't take anything unwrapped. The city obeyed because it likes rules that sound like care. Still a line of small, amber squares began to appear along the block, 1 on a step, none on the next 4, 1 on the 5th. Each set down with the kind of neatness a level admires. The first lay at the repaired tile step near Crescent Heights, 2 finger widths out from the riser, centered to the sill's grain, a little square of soft shine that should have stuck and didn't. No paper, no twist ends, just a caramel resting like a kept promise. The devil stood where porch becomes step, cape tidy, paper mouth squared at his left hip. The right hand did not bend. The sack sighed its dry little breath as if a hand had left it, and the caramel existed exactly where a hand would have put it. He went 4 doors without leaving anything. Ring, wait, step back. The middle nod for thanks he didn't say. Candy that found bottom alone and made no wait. At the 5th, he paused as if a school bell had rung far away and stepped 1 inch nearer the threshold than courtesy teaches. Inside, a radio tried to be bright and found the clean, ruler-straight tone that had threaded the night. While the tone held 2 breaths, the porch board laid itself a hair flatter. When it let go, a second caramel sat on the wood, 2 finger widths from the riser, centered, parallel. Amber turned the same way the other had been. No wrapper, no scent. A girl with angel wings reached toward the first, because children trust what is set down well. Her mother caught her wrist by habit. "Not unwrapped," she said, the line a city can say in its sleep. The girl made a face and said it wasn't sticky. It wasn't. The mother touched a corner and found it cool like tile in shade. She did not pick it up. She herded the wing through a doorway with candy of known origin and told herself some teenagers buy bulk and play tricks. Across the street, the sheriff's deputy, plain clothes, notebook, count, watched the pattern make itself on his line. 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing. 5, caramel. He wrote every 5th porch, unwrapped, no paper, and underlined the 5 once because 3s already had their mark in his book for the squeak that belonged to count, not shoe. He stepped to a first caramel and put his ear a polite inch from the wood. The candy should have smelled like sugar and a little butter. It smelled like the porch. He set his coin on it to see if metal would learn anything. The coin kept its face up and its face down in the same instant until his hand decided which he had meant to test. Miss Green, upstairs at the fourplex with her 2 windows, took her map from the drawer and circled the houses where amber appeared. 5, 10, 15. Her pencil ticked small, satisfied circles, while the stove clock held its second hand on the 11, and then remembered. From her west window she saw the devil on the odd side place nothing and go on. From her south window she saw the devil on the even do the same. At the shared 5th house beat, both panes acquired the little square at once, each aligned true to its threshold as if a carpenter had been there first. On Fuller, Miss Alvarez the teacher opened her door to the polite knock, and looked down to find one of the amber squares resting where a child's shoe would stand if a child had been told never to crowd a door. The line of staples along the devil's chin shone that faint district amber. The colour companies add when they promise rust will take longer. She looked at the caramel, then at the staple crowns, then at the caramel again, and felt foolish for thinking colours talk. The radio at her sink ran the tone and let it go. The caramel stayed a clean square. Ants that knew the neighbourhood walked their line to the step's edge, tested the air the way antennae test rain, and rerouted without filing a complaint with each other. At the Beverly Theatre, where Popcorn Salt tried to make the sidewalk own it, 2 caramels lay at the 5th and the 10th risers in the lobby stairs, as if a rule had found a different building to practice in. The usher stubbed 0713 duplicate still in his pocket, toed one with the edge of his shoe. It slid without leaving a gloss and came back to its chosen line the way a magnet finds north when you don't tell it to. Every 5, the milkman would say in the morning, looking at where they had been and not finding a stain. Tonight, the bus with Beverly in its window sighed, and the windshield held the devil's face 1 blink longer than the sidewalk needed it, chin line white as a wire, mask dry when every other pane fogged and cleared. He did the small middle nod to a mother who watched a square she would not let her children touch. He turned in his 3 agreements, mask first, shoulders next, feet last, and went 4 more porches without leaving anything. At the 5th he did not reach. The sack made its paper sigh. The porch received its little amber square as if counted for and entered. In the lighting yard, Mr. Cardenas drew another X because a caller on Crescent Heights said her porch lamp blinked exactly when a candy she did not own appeared on her step. He wrote out on, and on a line where no one would look, 5s meeting 3s. The overlay kept straight under his palm. On Ogden, the deputy stood over a 15th house square that lined to the chalk mark he had made earlier for the shoe squeak on 3. He did not touch either. He let the count stand there and be true. At closing the dime store, manager rolled the gate down to a fist above the concrete and let the night breathe in while he counted. The clerk brought him her pad with the neat 7:04 p.m. She had written when the tall buyer set 3 things on the counter: the devil mask with the moulded crease, a second paper sack folded flat, and the rubber hand meant for a bad joke in a handshake. She said the change had been exact. She said the bell over the door had called him out, and then she had not seen him on the sidewalk. The register was a brass national with a window that showed cents like teeth. He turned the key to Z and pulled the paper tongue from the throat. The audit tape came printing, date, his initials where ink always thinned, and the tidy ladder of what the machine believed had happened. He liked the order. He liked that it remembered better than people did. He read aloud because numbers behave when spoken. "Mask, devil," the type said in the store's rough language, then a price, then the department punch that meant holiday. The next line should have been the rubber hand, It was sack paper. No price. The store did not sell sacks, they gave them. The tape made its own blank where cents should sit, a clean hole in ink like a tooth missing by design. The line below it repeated, sack paper. No price again. Then hand rubber, with a number that made sense to men who had bought novelties for years. The clerk frowned. "I didn't ring too," she said, and felt foolish for correcting a machine to its face. She looked at the drawer. The nickels sat as they had sat, neat pyramids ready to be broken tomorrow. She felt with the back of a knuckle for the warmth the working register leaves. It felt the cool the shop keeps after hours. He ran his thumb up the tape to find the receipt number. The machine printed them light, 3 digits tucked before the words, "The way a house hides a builder's mark." 7:13, he traced it with his nail. The next sale, someone's candy cigarettes and a tin whistle. Or 7:14, in the margin the ink thinned and printed a straight, uninterrupted bar of black for the width of one breath. No digits, no words, as if the type bars had been pressed in agreement, without letters. The clerk looked up because the bar felt like the tone the radios had made, ruler straight and certain. The ceiling fan chain shivered and decided to be still. "What time did you say?" the manager asked, without looking away from the paper. 7:04, she said, tapping her pad. He nodded, then pointed to the far right of the tape, where the machine made time with a mean little stamp. 7:04 sat beside mask, devil. The 2 sack lines wore no time at all, only the machine's tiny dashes where numbers should live. Hand, rubber, wore 7:04 again, as if a second hand had passed over the stamp and chosen the same minute politely. Between sack and hand, the straight black bar no clock could own kept its width like a promise. They listened for the bell on the door. It did not ring. The street outside held the hush a block keeps when it has used all its children. The manager tore the section free and smoothed it on the glass counter. The clerk set a finger on the word sack paper and felt the paper resist the way stiff receipt stock does when it has more in it than ink. "He bought one," she said quietly, answering a question nobody had asked. But the tape knows too. He folded the strip and stapled it to a manila envelope the store used for deposits. The staple crowns flashed their faint amber the way Miss Alvarez's district staples did. He pressed them flat out of pride. The clerk watched his plier squeeze and thought of the chin seam that shone like staple metal when the porch light found it. In the empty store, the counter radio, left low, tried to sing and held the clean, ruler-straight tone for 2 breaths. The register drawer shivered as if a hand had set a coin down very gently. The manager and the clerk stood without speaking, because silence felt like correct behavior. Then the drawer breathed and pushed out a small second tongue of tape on its own. The manager took it. The machine had printed a single line, same ink density, same tooth at the edge. 7:13, no items, no cents, only the number repeating itself as if paper could remember twice. He slid both slips into the envelope and wrote, Oct 31, 704, 7, hold. In block letters a bookkeeper would respect, and no one else would understand. He locked the drawer and said all right to the counter the way men say it to rooms that listened. Outside, in the glass of the door, a devil mask crossed the sidewalk, one blink longer than the street needed, the chin crease taking a white wire of light. In a house 3 blocks over, a grey Polaroid rested in a drawer, not yet decided whether it would show a number when it finally chose to bloom. After the last doorbell and the last one more street, the house settled into its late version of warm, a sink drying itself, a radio low near the phone, a porch bulb deciding whether to hum. The father with the Polaroid remembered the bad frame and opened the junk drawer the way men open drawers to confirm their own memory. The grey lay where he'd left it. No picture, only the smudged promise of one. He set it on the kitchen table under the lamp and put the good print, the one that had behaved, next to it for company. In that one, the pumpkins sat fat, the cape cut a neat triangle, and the porch number, 1236, held true on the post like a badge. He turned the radio a notch to keep him awake. KFWB tried to carry a late song and, like the street had arranged, found the clean, ruler-straight tone and held it. While the tone lived in the room, the grey let go of being grey. It was not sudden. It was a decision that arrived by degrees, a matte first, the wood grain combing itself into view. The lower halves of the pumpkins next, roundness, choosing where to sit, the cape's triangle filled last, the chin seam on the mask taking a white wire of light so thin he couldn't tell if the camera had made it or the lamp had. He counted without knowing he was counting. 1 breath, 2. The tone released. The picture was a picture. He leaned close to see the porch number the way you check a child's temperature with your lips. The post showed the screw heads where numbers anchor. The little shadow under the plate lay honest. The rectangle where 1236 should live stayed a clean blank, not blown out, not smudged, finished paper with nothing printed on it, as if the chemistry had run up to an address and learned it was unlisted. He picked up both prints and held them to the lamp, one after the other. In the good frame, the digits looked a little too sharp, the way things look when a hand tries twice. In the late-bloomed one, the plate was present, and the numbers were a silence you could name. He put a ruler across the blank to prove something to himself, and found the edges truer than the rest of the picture, as if the photograph knew right angles better there than anywhere else. He flipped the bad now good over to write the time. The pencil left 11:11 twice, the second a whisper, riding the first like a carbon copy that forgot it wasn't. He underlined out of habit, and the underline laid itself perfectly straight, without his hands wobble, a little staple of graphite holding the hour to the paper. He tasted metal, the way men do when a room decides to feel electrical. In the living room, the porch number over the actual door had eased a hair to the left since afternoon. He had not seen it yet. In the picture where the number should have been, the plate sat exactly plumb. He tried a trick from the photo counterman, breathing lightly on the emulsion to wake any lazy chemistry. The pumpkins fogged and cleared. The blank would not. The radio apologized to itself with a toothpaste jingle. Somewhere beyond the kitchen window, a bus sighed, Beverly. In the glass of that window, the devil's mask rode a blink longer than the sidewalk needed, chin seam bright. Then glass remembered glass and gave the room back. The father set the two prints edge to edge. The cape's edge matched. The pumpkins matched. The threshold scuff he'd been meaning to sand matched. The number refused to be there in one and sat a little too sharp in the other. He slid the late-bloomed frame into the slot behind the phone book, where bills wait, where notes sleep, and told himself he'd ask the counter about fixer issues in the morning. His hand, proving nothing, reached to the front door and checked the plate with a thumb. The screws felt new under the paint, threads bright like fresh brass. The digits under his nail were what digits are, metal with a nick, a little grit where a brush missed. He stepped back to see if they were straight, and thought for a second. They were straighter than they had ever been. In the drawer, the pencil mark on the back of the print settled like a staple pressed flush. On the table, the good frame looked a touch proud of itself. On the radio, midnight crept toward its own tone. He took both pictures to the bedroom because some things asked to be slept near. He left the porch bulb on without knowing he had. The number outside held its small lean you can't see unless you set a ruler to it. Inside the picture that finally decided to be true, the space for numbers stayed correct and empty, as if a city could be photographed without its address. Late, when the block had given up its little crowds and saved its porch bulbs for stragglers, the devil shape reached a corner drugstore with a glass door that made the street into a picture. The closed sign hung backward to the night. Inside, a clock over the soda fountain sat at 11, its second hand thinking about the mark before it owned it. A pharmacist in his shirt sleeves finished a ledger line and listened to the room the way men do when they have decided it is time to stop listening. The devil stood at the door without knocking. Cape neat, sack squared at the left hip, the right hand a board that did not bend. In the glass the figure doubled, the white seam at the chin drawing itself twice, a narrow wire of light that looked like someone had laid a ruler against the reflection and traced carefully. A bus with Beverly in its face sighed past. For a blink, the mask in the door rode with the bus, while the body stayed at the curb. Then Glass remembered Glass, and the picture returned to itself. Across the street, the plainclothes deputy paused his count, 1, 2, squeak, and waited to see if the squeak would follow the glass. It didn't. It stayed with the count painted on the sidewalk, where his chalk mark had long since rubbed thin. In the drugstore, the pharmacist reached to kill the counter radio and found it had already chosen the thin, ruler-straight tone for him. The room held its breath for two, the way the night had taught it to. The devil tipped his head in that small middle nod that wasn't yes and wasn't no, and, for the first time anyone would be able to swear to, raised the left hand without collapsing the sack. The paper mouth kept its square double lips holding shape the way the clerk's audit tape had held a blank line. Fingers, ordinary, careful, caught the rubber under the chin where the staple crowns had shone at Miss Alvarez's door. The right hand stayed useless and true, a painted board at the hip. He lifted. Rubber should tug hair or skin. It should make a sound like a small kiss losing its nerve. The glass gave the only noise, a faint seat of suction you hear more with your teeth than with your ear. The mask came away an inch, then two, the crease along its chin bright as wire in the door's reflection. Under it, the face waited. For a slice of a second, the pharmacist thought he saw a boy's jawline, pale with the night. Then the line under the rubber declared itself, a straight, narrow seam in skin where no seam belongs, drawn so fine and true it might have been pressed there by the very mask he had made up his mind to see. It caught the door's light in the same way, white as a staple crown, regular along the length. A rule lay across a cheek and told to stay. The deputy wrote, mask off, line remains, then underlined remains and felt foolish and correct at once. He watched the breath on the glass. Around the line the fog should have climbed and softened and then gone. It made two small ovals left and right, honest as any child's breath in cold. The line itself kept clear, a dry path from lower lip to throat, as if taught not to take steam. The pharmacist felt, absurdly, that the door had learned a new way to fog. The radio let the tone go and apologized with a jingle from a toothpaste that promised to polish what people show. The mask hung in the left hand for the width of one remembered bell. In the door, the reflection showed two masks, one lifted, one still on, like a misprint you get when paper rides twice under the same number. The devil set the rubber back where it had been. The crease met crease, staple to staple. Nothing in the fit argued. He turned his three agreements: mask first, shoulders next, feet last. The sack made its dry little breath, though no sweet had fallen. He gave the middle nod to the pharmacist who had not come from behind his counter, and to the deputy who had not crossed the street. On the fifth store window down, the glass briefly kept the seam on a face that was not standing in front of it, then thought better and returned to product displays and a cardboard rocket for cough syrup. When the devil stepped away from the drugstore door, the closed sign settled a degree straighter than it had been. The pharmacist wrote 1111 sawline in the margin next to balances, and the pencil's underline laid itself perfectly, as if guided by a staple pressed flush. The deputy checked the chalk he'd left earlier. A new, neat tick had appeared on the third hash, without his coin deciding it. He did not add it to his book, because books do not have a column for that. He only watched the cape choose the next porch, counted 1, 2, and waited, not for a shoe, but for the line to show him where the night would decide a face begins. After midnight, the block learned its quieter version of warm. Radios went to low voices and then to clocks. Porch bulbs chose humming over shining. A bus with Beverly in its face gave a last tired sigh and did not return. On a step near the schoolyard fence that kept two streets from touching, the devil shape paused where porch becomes air. Cape neat. Sack squared at the left hip. Right hand still the careful board that never bent. In Miss Green's west window, no one stood. In her south window, no one stood. At the corner drugstore, the closed sign remembered its straightness. The pharmacist, ledger shut, felt the room consider a tone and choose not to. The plainclothes deputy on his second walk found the chalk he had set at 3s, still answering to itself. The milkman slept toward an hour when sugar prints make sense. The lighting yard map lay under its overlay with its X's every third block, and a pencil note that said 3s meeting 5s. On the porch, where the repaired tile step kept its new grout bright, the devil set the sack down without letting go. The paper mouth stayed square and breathed a dry little sigh, the sound it had made all night when a hand left it, even though a hand had not. He lifted the left fingers away. The sack did not collapse. Its double lip held the rectangle the way the dime store tape had held a blank line. Inside, nothing slid, nothing thumped. The square only rustled once, a small, orderly flutter like a page turning itself in a still room. The right hand, the board that never folded, touched nothing and performed nothing. The cape hung without promise. The chin seam shone its thin wire under the porch bulb, staple crown bright. For one slow breath, the neighborhood's radios, where they still lived, offered the ruler-straight tone the night had been practicing. It laid along the porch level as if to check it. The sack made its paper breath without a hand, and then chose stillness. The tone let go. He reached for the mask the way he had at the drugstore door, left fingers careful, right hand useless by the hip. Rubber lifted an inch, then 2. In the storm door glass there were 2 versions of the same act, one raised, one not. Then the glass decided and kept the raised. Under the rubber the line on the face remained, straight and dry, a seam where faces do not wear seams. He lowered the mask again until staple met staple, the joiners along the chin catching the bulb, like little amber teeth that had never known rust. He turned in his 3 agreements, mask first, shoulders next, feet last, and found no next porch to go to because the hour had run out of porches. He inclined the small middle nod at an empty street that had given him company and set the cape's hem to the mat the way a person sets a coat on a chair. The sack rustled once more on its own, and then learned quiet. It happened without a sound you could take to a neighbor. The cape let go of shoulders that were not there. The mask tipped forward and kept its face until gravity persuaded it to fold. When it touched the porch, the rubber did not bounce. It remembered flatness and obliged. The right hand, which had never bent, did not fall because there was nothing to fall from. It lay with the cape as if it had been placed parallel to the threshold by a level. No shoes scuffed, no breath fogged the storm door glass. The chin seam's thin white line held in reflection, one blink longer than the rubber deserved, and then the glass remembered how it ought to behave. Across the street, the deputy watched and did not write, because books like columns, and there is no heading for no one standing. He counted once, twice, waited for the squeak on dry cement that belonged to threes. It did not come. On the fifth porch along, a small amber square sat where a shoe would if a child had been taught not to crowd a door. It did not melt. It did not move. Ants changed directions politely. In the kitchen where the Polaroids lay, the father's late-bloomed frame kept its blank where a number should live. In the yard office, Mr. Cardenas capped his grease pencil and left the overlay as straight as he'd found it. In Miss Alvarez's runner, a faint amber glint at the threshold stayed where a staple crown might if a crown had something left to hold. On the repaired tile step, the costume remembered satin and paper and rubber. It crumpled into the shape of a story people would try to tell with their hands. The sack stayed a neat square beside it and did not sag. After a moment, the porch boards released a tiny, polite breath, like rooms do when a weight leaves. Far off, a bus that wasn't running imagined Beverly one last time in a window it no longer had. The city let the hour turn and kept its numbers where they were. Dawn came in the plain way Los Angeles prefers. A lighter grey at the eaves, a bird that tried 2 notes, a trash can lid, tested and set down. The milkman made his turn onto the block with the rack in his truck singing its bright little clink. He liked this hour because the city let him set things where they belonged, and remember he had done it. Halloween's heat had thinned. Steps held night, the way bowls hold last water. He saw the Cape first, a small dark hill at the repaired tile step near Crescent Heights, rubber folded once over itself where a face should keep a shape. Beside it, the paper sack sat square, lip doubled, a rectangle that had not learned to sag. He set his truck brake, because men who carry glass like proof make sure, and climbed with the soft knees his route had taught him. He crouched. The Cape smelled like nothing. No talc from dime store rubber, no lawn from late walking, no sugar dust. The mask's chin crease held its white thread of light even without a face under it, like the seam had learned to shine by itself. He set one bottle down 2 steps lower and watched how morning took to glass. The bottle fogged a little around the shoulder and then cleared. He breathed on the storm door pane to see if breath still belonged to glass. A clean oval bloomed where his mouth had been, honest as any morning. Down the middle of it ran a dry line, chin to throat height, a path that refused dew the way last night had trained it. He wiped with his sleeve. The line returned when he breathed again, a narrow place that did not learn fog. He touched the sack. Paper should slacken at dawn, fibers remember humidity and give in. This one kept its right angle like a box new from a storeroom. He slid 2 fingers under its mouth to test weight, and heard the small, neat sound he had learned last night, lonely candy against a bottom that did not settle. He pulled his hand back, because people with good hands know when to stop. The sack rustled once, as if to say it had got along fine without him, and would continue. Farther down the block, the first mother to wake for ordinary reasons opened a door and hissed her breath when she found a small amber square on her 5th house step. No wrapper, no smell. She fetched a spatula from the kitchen to pry it up, because spatulas speak kitchen law. The caramel lifted without bending and lay true on the steel as if a line had drawn it. She set it on a saucer. It did not lose its edges before coffee. The plain-clothes deputy returned to the chalk he had worn to ghosts on the sidewalk. He held his notebook shut because writing things requires words like "are" and "was," and this morning had not chosen one. He stood over the cape and the mask and the square sack and made the middle nod the block had learned. He reached for the mask and then stopped at the staple crowns along the chin, 12, even as fence posts, faint amber to a practiced eye. He counted them without touching. 12 still, as if the night had been exact and the day agreed. The dime store clerk walked to work to avoid thinking about gates that roll up by themselves. She slowed at the sight of the costume because people slow for neatness. "Left something?" she said to the step, then felt foolish and made herself useful. She picked up 3 green mints she knew from somewhere and laid them parallel to the threshold like small witnesses. On the father's kitchen table, the late-bloomed Polaroid kept its perfect blank where the porch number belonged. He breathed on the print to test a trick a counterman had once told him, and the graphite underline he had made on the back of the card pressed itself a degree flatter, as if graphite could learn staples. On Miss Green's dinette map, 2 circles she had drawn at the dead ends that weren't dead looked cleaner in first light than pencil should. The milkman finished his crouch and stood because a man cannot live forever, at step height. He left the 2 bottles where 2A likes them and clipped a note under the clothespin for 2B. "Watch the stoop." It was not advice. It was a promise to himself that another set of eyes would see what he saw without being told. In the storm door glass, as he turned, the chin line kept its dry path 1 blink longer than his breath deserved, and then the pain behaved like morning. He drove on. The rack sang its little song. Behind him the cape and the mask lay in their careful hill. The sack kept its square like new stock, waiting on a shelf. Ants tested the step and drew a gentle curve around a place a shoe might have stood if a child had been taught not to crowd a door. On the corner, a bus that wasn't running did not sigh, "Beverly." The city put light on numbers and made them true. The door plate at 1236 held a lean A ruler would see, and in a drawer, the photograph where numbers should live kept a blank that did not feel like a mistake. By 9, the station smelled of carbon and floor wax. The plain-clothes deputy brought what could be brought. The cape folded the way strangers fold laundry, the devil mask with its 12 faint amber crowns along the chin, and the paper sack that had not learned to slacken. He set them on the property counter and watched the clerk do what clerks do: choose a tag, uncap a pen, reach for string, set a weight of procedure on things that resist story. The pen behaved, the string behaved, the sack did not. He opened a paper evidence bag and gave the sack a courtesy squeeze to make it fit. It declined politely, corners staying right-angled, mouth squared like a box fresh from a storeroom. The clerk made a small noise he saved for stubborn items, set both palms on the evidence bag's sides, and breathed. The sides bowed. The sack kept its little geometry. The clerk changed tactics, tagged the sack itself, and wrote, "Kept shape," in the margin, where comments pretend to be shy. On the mask, the clerk tried the fingerprint brush because routine has muscle memory. Powder likes to settle in whirls and loops. Today it drifted to the straight, staple-marked seam and laid itself into a perfect chalk-white rule, chin to throat, then shrugged off everything else like porcelain. The clerk breathed on the rubber to make moisture help. 2 honest ovals bloomed where a mouth would make them. The seam kept dry, a path cleared, as if someone had drawn a part and told air to respect it. The property room radio, left low for company, chose the city's new trick and held the ruler-straight tone for the width of 2 breaths. While it carried, the tag string on the cape drew itself a hair straighter. The deputy watched because he had begun to expect straightness where there should be slack. When the tone let go, the string remembered how to drape. He moved to the report desk and fed a sheet into the typewriter, a Remington with a ribbon that printed honest black, and a habit of leaning a little on ones. Halloween, unknown male juvenile, costume. He started and paused at juvenile because the word felt like a lie told in daylight. The carriage hummed patient. He typed the time, 7:11 p.m. The ones came twice, one riding the other cleanly without blur. He backed up to strike through and found the overprint straight as a staple pressed flush. He left it. He underlined 7:11 to remind himself which minutes mattered. The underline laid itself perfectly true, no wobble from his hand. He added every third step, squeak on dry cement, and every fifth porch, unwrapped caramel, no scent. He set the Polaroid the father had brought beside the page, late bloomed, porch plate crisp, numbers absent, and typed, address plate visible, digits not. The carriage bell sounded too clean, like glass tapped with a fingernail. Across town, Miss Alvarez unlocked her classroom cabinet and ran a finger down the inventory she had written last Friday. 10 sleeves of district staples, each with its faint amber wash, sat where they should. She broke a new strip. Red paper thread clung to the first crown. She placed the thread on a blank index card and, as a reflex she could not name, wrote chin on the top edge. The line under the word drew itself straight enough to feel like a ruler had been involved, though none had. At the dime store, the manager opened his envelope and slid out the tape the register had printed last night. Mask, devil at 7:04, sack, paper with no price, sack, paper, again, hand, rubber, and between them the straight black bar where numbers had decided to be a line. He put the new day's tape beside it and watched the counter print the next number, 713 again, same ink weight, same tooth. He tore it and tucked it under the first, because throwing one away felt like an offence to paper. The deputy stapled his report. The office stapler took the crowns obediently, but when he pressed the last one flat, the cheap nickel flashed a faint tea colour, amber like the district stock. He pinched the crown to prove his eyes wrong. It felt ordinary and looked the same, only in the corner of his vision did it keep the tint the mask wore. He carried the cape and mask to the property shelves. The clerk had found a box for the sack, heavy corrugate with straight corners. He set the square within the square and felt the small, patient resistance of something that preferred its own dimensions. On the shelf above, an evidence tag read 0713 in a neat hand. He checked the log to see who had written it, and found his own entry a page back, 0713 again, ink density, matching like a carbon copy printed over itself. When he closed his notebook, the carbon sheet under his report whispered and made a second underline where his one had been. He left it. In the bus depot across town, a day driver climbed into a windshield that remembered a dry path from chin to throat. He wiped, and it returned when his breath did. At the lighting yard, Mr. Cardenas uncapped his grease pencil to erase last night's overlay and found the X's lifted off as one straight peel, adhesions agreeing to go together. The deputy set his coin on the report to keep it from curling. Heads showed and held. He flipped it once. Heads remained. He flipped it again and let it rest, because paper was drawing its own lines, and a coin that had chosen could be allowed to keep its mind. Outside, a bus that wasn't scheduled did not sigh. Beverly. Inside, the station clock's second hand paused a polite instant on the 11, then finished its work like a man who had remembered what he was saying. Before the bell, the school made its own weather. Floors that held last night's cool, a clock that clicked once to remind itself it could, paper smell from the office. Mr. Ortega, who had keys for every door and a pencil stub behind his ear, rolled the dust mop onto the gym floor and liked the shine it gave back. He'd laid wax last week. The varnish had the quiet pride of a job done with time and light coats. He pushed a lane's length and heard it. 1, 2, squeak. Not his wheels, not a pebble, not the stutter a bad caster gives. A true gym squeak without a shoe, high and thin, put down exactly on the third count like a metronome that had been promised a job. He stopped the mop and listened. Air moved the rafters a little. The clock over the scoreboard put its second hand on the 11 and considered. He took 3 steps in his soft soles, 1, 2, 3. And on his third, the floor answered him with the right cry, as if it had been waiting for a foot to make it honest. He chalked a mark at the squeak with the soapstone he kept for lines, a small tick on the maple where the board seams meet. He walked 3 more, 1, 2, squeak, and chalked again. He did the length of a free-throw lane and stood back. The marks made a dotted path a coach would admire for drills, regular, straight as a rule, laid across wood that had been taught its grain. On the 5th bleacher bench, someone had left a little amber square the way the block had last night, 2 finger widths from the riser, centered to the plank's face. No wrapper, no scent. He slid a dustpan under it with the care you use for frog jars and set it on the stage where the school put props when the PTA practiced. It kept its edges. Ants that patrolled the auditorium curtains tried it with their front feet and chose the wall instead. He pulled the mop again, slow. The third count cry came back in front of the mop head, not under it, polite as a bell. The PA system on the wall, quiet since last week's fire drill, woke to a soft breath and held a clean, ruler-straight tone for the width of 2 of his breaths, the same note the neighborhood had been hearing in radios and drafty rooms. While it held, the squeak forgot to happen. When it let go, the third count remembered its job. He squinted at the finish where the first chalk sat. The wax showed faint polish ovals where a dozen kids had done lay-up steps yesterday. Foot, up. Between the ovals ran a narrow, straight shine, chin to throat height if you imagined a face printed on the maple, a kept path the mop did not blur. He breathed on the floor to feel silly and sensible at once. The moisture fogged and cleared. A dry line stayed where breath should have learned to live, thin as a staple crown pressed into rubber. In the equipment cage he found the box of staples Miss Alvarez had signed 2 weeks back when she asked for posters to stay. The sleeves had their faint tea-color wash. He tore a strip and a red paper thread clung to the first crown. Without thinking, he pinned a notice to the cork by the gym door. No shoes with marking soles, and watched his underline lay itself, ruler true, no wobble from his hand. The staple crowns flashed amber for a blink, and then remembered nickel. When the first class came in, the boys in T-shirts ran their 3 steps because boys do. Mr. Ortega listened. At 1, the floor kept quiet. At 2, the hush before the whistle. At 3, each time, squeak, the right sound laid at the mark he had chalked. He rubbed 1 tick with his thumb. The chalk lifted, the sound landed there anyway, like a count that had chosen a spot under the finish rather than a mark above it. He took the amber square from the stage and put it on a saucer by the office coffee as a kind of test. It kept its edges. He wrote the day's work on his clipboard. Wax, okay. Peer hum. Third step, squeak, and underlined squeak, because some words like being held down. The line drew itself straight enough to feel mechanical. He looked through the high windows at the chain link that made Miss Green's 2 streets and saw nothing but light. He locked the cage and set the mop where mops go. In the gym, the board at the free-throw line waited for a third step, as if the day had taught it to, and the clock, courteous, let its second hand leave the 11 and travel on. By afternoon, the drugstore's photo counter woke to its own small tide. Paper envelopes leaned in racks, carbon slips clipped under bulldog clamps, a tray of blue bulbs. Someone forgot to return to hardware. The clerk, with ink on his fingers, liked this part. Names matched to orders, rubber date stamps set true, proof prints fanned like playing cards. He flipped the bell on the counter to polite, ring for service, and let the dryer's low motor make company. The first envelope wore a tidy hand. Hayworth, Halloween. Inside, the brownie proofs showed pumpkins and front steps. Children caught mid-smile. He set one on the glass to trim. A devil boy at a porch edge, chin a narrow white, the sack mouth square. Behind the square lived another, faint, a second bag, nested exactly in the first, the way reflection sometimes can't decide. He flattened the print and pressed the trimmer's bar. The cut rode ruler true. He breathed on the glass to wipe dust. The fog laid itself where people breathed and forgot the inch that ran from chin to throat, a dry little path that ignored him and cleared first. The woman from Hayworth came with her sweater folded on her arm. "Two of the devil," she said, soft as if asking for extra change. He showed her the faint second square behind the first. "Light flare," he said, because a counter has words for strangeness. Not a defect. She nodded the middle nod that had gotten into the neighborhood and slid the prints back into the envelope the way you slide a letter you've already decided not to send. The father with the Polaroid came next, holding his own too, a good frame with the porch number, a touch too sharp, and a late-bloomed frame with the plate present and the digits absent. "Can you fix a blank?" he asked, foolish and sensible at once. The clerk set the prints on the glass and turned the desk lamp. In the good one, the 1236 sat proud, and a hair darker at the edges like a place printed twice. In the other, the plate took light perfectly and would not accept a number. He checked for developer stains, fogging, thumb oil, anything a bench can claim. Nothing. "We can rewash," he offered, knowing it wouldn't matter. The father pressed his pencil along the back to write the hour, and the underline drew itself straight as a staple crown. The clerk felt the desk motor hum a degree steadier, a small, ruler-clean tone for the width of 2 breaths. The dryer's belts joined it and then let go. He stamped dates on their envelopes, no V1, and reached for the order numbers. The little red wheel in the metal data liked to lean on ones when tired. It turned to 713 and clicked the paper hard, ink thick and even. He turned it again by habit. 7 and 13 printed a second time, same weight, same tooth, as if the stamp had learned how to repeat without moving. He set one envelope aside and tried again on a blank. 714 appeared where sense wanted it, then, as he lifted his hand, ghosted itself into 713 with a perfect, straight overlap like 2 layers had agreed to be one. He rubbed the pad of his thumb across a proof to see if the inked border would smear. The skin came away clean and cool, as if the paper had lived in shade. He looked through the loop at the devil's chin line and found a seam thin as wire, regular as stitches, the way Miss Alvarez would say, "Staples run," if staples ran under rubber. He could almost see a faint tea color in the highlight, amber that vanished when he tried to look full on and stayed when his eyes slid off. Behind him, the soda fountain clicked on its own timer. The clock over the syrup bar set its second hand on the 11, paused politely, and continued. The closed sign he had straightened last night kept true in the door. He wrote, "Hold for recheck," on the father's envelope, and the underline laid itself ruler true without his hand deciding how to wobble. He stapled the flap. For a blink, the crown flashed tea-colored like the school stock, and then remembered nickel. A boy waiting for film from a pocket camera clicked his transistor low. KFWB tried a tune and, as if warned, flattened into the neighborhood's thin, perfect tone. It laid across the counter glass like a straight edge. While it held, the trimmer's steel felt lighter. When it let go, the room remembered hums. The clerk stacked the day's numbers in a neat pile, 713 twice on top without his meaning to, then slid the envelopes toward their owners. "Some come back better the second time," he said, honest enough. The father tucked the blank number frame into his pocket with the good one and felt the pocket flatten around the edges like a book, agreeing to hold its place. The woman with the sweater did the middle nod and went. When the counter emptied, the clerk took a scrap from the cutter and made a straight tier by hand. It should have wandered. It didn't. He laughed once in his throat because rooms teach you when to humour them. In the door's glass, a devil mask rode past, one blink longer than the sidewalk deserved, chin seam bright, 2 sacks nested for a breath and then one. He flipped the bell back to quiet and set the stamp carefully at 7:14. The wheel obliged. On the scrap under it, where no one would look, 7:13 sat beneath it anyway, perfectly aligned, as if paper prefers certain counts and does not mind saying so. In the telephone exchange on La Brea, the morning crew took coffee in cups that knew the shape of lips. The switchboard wore its cords like tame snakes. The operators wore headsets that left small, kind dents in hair. Miss Turner liked the order, the way lights asked permission, the way a plug, once set, stayed. On her blotter, she laid a metal rule for show and a pencil that had learned to underline straight even when hands forget. At 9:17, the test desk rang through with the voice the company kept for worrying. "Subscribers report a tone, holding," the man said, soft to avoid sounding frightened of instruments. Miss Turner glanced at the wall clock. Its second hand took the polite pause. At 11 the neighborhood had started to favor, and then went on. "Not our tone," the man added, as if that mattered to lines once the lines had decided. She wrote, "Hold," and her underline drew itself flat as type. In the lobby a payphone stood in a glass booth with a ring of clean around the mouth level where breath lives. A boy with a varsity B, leather jacket, back to smelling like nothing, stepped in to call his girl before school. He pressed a dime to the slot. Coins know where they belong. This one considered and declined. It slid back into the return cup with the correct bright sound a dime makes, and lay so square in the metal that its head pointed dead north. He tried again in the mood boys use to turn luck into a joke. The dime returned, head to north again, as if the slot were a compass and had learned preference. He breathed on the glass to be 15 and human. 2 clean ovals bloomed, and a dry path from chin to throat stayed, the same little road the storm doors on the block had learned. At Miss Turner's board, a line lamp winked where no caller waited. She jacked it to see if the line was playing at being alive. The trunk held nothing, then a clean, ruler-straight tone, 2 breaths long, no wobble. She pulled the plug. The tone kept its width anyway, laid across the plank like a rule. She marked the trunk number on her sheet, 713. When she looked back, her hand had written it twice, same graphite weight, stacked like carbon that forgot it was supposed to copy down, not over. The boy at the booth pressed the coin again, this time with shoulder behind it. The slot swallowed and relented. The dial tone came on like a room-finding voice, only not the woolly comfort of usual. It rang the thin, perfect note the neighborhood knew. He dialed his girl's number on the rotary, the holes smooth under his finger. The pulse counted faithfully, 1, 2, 3, at every third. The booth floor offered the faintest honest gym squeak, maple under varnish, printed somewhere else and laid here by decision. He told himself the finish needed a mat. At the board, calls stacked and behaved, except where they didn't. A Crescent Heights mother asked the operator sweetly to ring the lighting yard again. The lamp blinked exactly when a little candy set itself down, and Miss Turner made the middle nod into her voice so the woman could hear it. On the slip, she wrote Candy 5th, lamp out on and drew her line under the 5 before she knew she had. It laid as straight as the yardman's overlay yesterday. A messenger brought over a complaint envelope from the photo counter across town. The stamp on the flap read 714. Under it, the page wore 713 perfectly aligned, as if the date wheel had agreed not to argue with favoured numbers. Miss Turner filed it and watched the stack edge itself into a plumb column without her hand. The boy's dime finally decided to mean it. The call went through. "It's me," he said, and felt foolish for saying the obvious into a line that made truth taut. "Your jacket?" she asked. "Nothing," he said, honest. "Smells like nothing." "Good," she answered. And both of them knew it wasn't, and liked saying it anyway. The dial tone returned when they hung up and held 2 breaths because it could. When Miss Turner rose to stretch, the coin return in the lobby coughed once and gave back a dime no one had asked for. It lay head north, perfect. She reached for it, then didn't, because sometimes metal keeps its mind. Back at the board, a dark glass panel reflected her chair and, for one blink, longer than reflection should, kept the thin, white seam of a chin where no face stood, then thought better and gave the room back. She put her pencil on hold again, and the line drew itself, ruler true, across a page that had begun politely to choose its own straightness. By evening the day had put its fingerprints on everything: bakery glass, bus rails, the brass at 12:36, and still the small, taut straightness held where it wanted. The property shelf in the station took the square within its square, the paper sack in the corrugate box, corners obliging each other like rulers stacked. The cape lay folded to instruction, rubber mask atop with its 12 faint amber crowns along the chin, a seam that looked truer than glue ever learns to be. The room remembered heat in vents and pencils, and forgot it on the line from lower lip to throat. The plain-clothes deputy came off shift and stood in the doorway long enough for the clerk to say, "Go home." He made the middle nod the neighbourhood knew, and checked his report again. The underline under 711 had not drifted, though papers curl when they want. His coin kept heads for good manners. He did not make it choose. Across town, Miss Alvarez wiped her board and watched the date she'd written lay a fraction too straight, as if chalk had learned a ruler while she turned to pull down a map. 12 students, by chance, raised hands for the question that needed none. She counted them and thought of staple crowns marching along a rubber chin. At dismissal, she checked the cabinet. 10 sleeves sat where 10 belonged. She broke one anyway, and the red thread that clings to first crowns found her palm like a sentence's underline. Miss Green folded her ironing away and slid her map back in the drawer. 2 circles she had drawn where streets refuse each other kept their clean edges, graphite not smudging even under the pressure a drawer adds. She breathed on the west pane, and then the south. 2 honest ovals bloomed, and down the centre of each pane the dry, narrow path returned, a chin to throat that glass had adopted as its habit. She laughed without sound, the way people do when a parlour trick puts its hat back on. At the lighting yard, Mr. Cardenas lifted last night's overlay to a hook and found the grease X's stayed in a faint, obedient chain. Every 3rd block, the path skipping the schoolyard like a person steps over something that used to be their size. He drew a new date, and the pencil's crossbar laid itself ruler true. In the gutter of his sheet, where no supervisor would look, he wrote 5s meet 3s, and the letters aligned as if a type case had set them. The Beverly usher, sweeping matinee salt, tipped a toe to the 10th stair. No caramel waited now. The air remembered its shape anyway, a little square of colder nothing where lost sweetness had sat unwrinkled. He touched the duplicate stub in his pocket and found both halves still reading 713 without needing each other to do so. The dime store manager balanced the drawer and slid the envelope back into its drawer, tape labelled 7-1-13 twice, and the blank line between sack and hand like a held breath. The clerk set a rubber hand back on its peg, and without looking, set the chin of the nearest devil mask so the seam met the hook dead center. The bell over the door rang to no one, and then behaved. At the gym, between last bell and the janitor's mop, a boy with new sneakers tested 3 steps the way boys test rules. 1, 2, squeak. He looked for water and found polish. He looked for eyes and found the clock kindly pausing at the 11 and lifting on. On La Brea, the switchboard ran its evening hum. Miss Turner's pencil underlined "hold" twice on a complaint slip, and neither line wandered. The payphone coughed a dime nobody had asked for. It lay head north, patient, as if metal wanted to be told which way to think. At 12:36, the father with the Polaroids put both prints in a drawer where scissors and string live. In one, the numbers sat sharper than honesty. In the other, the plate stayed a finished emptiness that did not ask to be filled. He checked the porch and straightened the house digits to soothe himself. His thumb found new threads in old brass. When the hour came back around to the place nights keep for themselves, a radio in someone's kitchen tried a song, considered, and held the thin, ruler-straight tone the neighborhood had learned. 2 breaths only. The sack in its box gave its small paper sigh, as if a hand had left it and hadn't. The seam on the mask caught the shelf light like a staple crown, pressed correctly, and forgot to dull. The city heard itself count, 3s where steps belong, 5s where porches sit, and decided not to argue. The deputy, nearly out the door, turned once more to see if anything would relax. The string on the cape remembered slacker heartbeat, and then, politely, found straight again. He didn't write it. There is no line for a room choosing its own line. He dimmed the hall switch. In the glass of the property case, a chin's narrow white rode with his reflection 1 blink longer than it had any right to, and then behaved. He made the middle nod to the hour and let the door catch. Outside, somewhere a bus that wasn't scheduled, did not sigh Beverly, and the block, warm, ordinary, honest, kept its numbers where they were. He lets the hour settle. Porches dim to a hum, the map rolls itself up. The straight lines keep their small secrets. The channel thanks everyone who stayed to the end, quiet listeners, night shifters, and the few who keep a radio on low. New, true history horror returns nightly. Gentle pacing, precise dates, and details left in their original places. If this story helped someone breathe easier or kept them counting 3s and 5s, consider letting the algorithm know it learns from small signals. He leaves a few questions for the comments the way a desk leaves notes for morning. Which detail held on, 7-11 at the radio bench, the 3rd step squeak, the 5th house caramels, or the porch number that refused to print? If a town has its own version, a doorway that never fogs, a ticket that stamps the same number twice, the channel is listening. Before the room goes dark, he asks for one last tradition. Viewers can leave city and local time to add a pin to the night map. The comments turn into a timeline that helps others drift. Lights go lower, files close in order. Tomorrow's case waits on the corner of the desk. He steps out, leaves the plate straight, and lets the house keep its quiet. Good night.